for this. The city's asking for more now on the trail to be designated as some Utah Trail Network up to a 10-foot trail. I don't think 10 feet was ever required in your original design.
The Utah Trail Network, which is now part of UDOT, we're seeing it on the trail clear to Soldier Hollow from the depot. We had it, we were designing it as 8 and they're now requiring 10. But I don't know how strict they are. Like UDOT, well, it's part of that Utah Trail Network. I guess UDOT's figured out they want. I think it's probably because they're seeing more e-bikes and all that kind of stuff on trails.
It's a mixed use trail.
Yeah,
So
they want it to be
usually
wider, so there's not a conflict. But my understanding is that we started designing at 8 and they're now saying, no, it's gotta be 10.
Usually,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where did that come from?
It's just more that you could impinge, right?
Yeah.
The frontage.
Well, and I can't imagine. I mean, like I commented on the thing, and I was the one that said it, that for one block, you couldn't narrow that down, even though it's part of that UTN network. It just seems a little,
With correct signage and stuff like that, saying. this is
Sure.
over.
well,
Whatever
instead of
is
bringing it
located.
across the street one block earlier, you keep it, narrow it down, and then bring it across the next block.
Yeah, that's definitely an option.
It's
And that
crazy
would
that they
change-
wouldn't accept that.
Well, that's where perhaps the city council
Yeah, we
needs
probably
to
have some-
say some things, and I told Russ he could bring it to the city council. He wasn't ready for that, perhaps, but. we
Yeah, he
can
come
certainly
in, didn't want to
discuss
see
in
it
the
come back, but
Communication items, right?
Yeah, we can talk about
I'm
it.
just
Yeah.
saying,
I think, honestly, when I read his thing, I thought it was less about, I don't want to bring it back so much as I think we're actually more aligned than we thought we were.
well, we've got to make
But
sure.
we gotta get there.
Right, we've got to make sure Heber Light Power is protected, it's parking. I hope the landscaping strip, and then a very nice fence, doesn't need to be platinum, but still a nice fence that's going to protect the views as well as the public from walking onto those tracks from the Heber Light Power side. And then I would like a fence on the trail side too, so that people aren't just going into the tracks when they want.
well, like I said, I'm hoping the trail could be on the southern side of the road.
You know, just the.
East
frontage on the
side.
road, 'cause people.
Yeah.
100 cars.
They need to widen that sidewalk a bit into the street on that side, whatever. I don't see having a trail down through the switch, even though they're only there 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah,
I don't think it'll be a
on that
surprise
side.
for you. I think we're just trying to remember what we talked about.
Yeah.
Because Russ is,
Well, there was a little
Russ's
bit of push,
mentality is-
there was a little bit of push wanting it, push a little bit into Heber Light and Power, and I said, no,
Yeah.
that wasn't the agreement.
Well,
None of us
Russ is
remember
worried
that.
about the right of
Huh?
way,
none of us remember that.
That it would do that. No, it was going to the east, get out of there.
and, you know, Russ is worried as a city engineer about, shouldn't we preserve as much right of way as possible on the road for the future? And I'm saying, you know, this is a short road. It's more a destination location instead of pass through, even though the school does pass through. But still, it's more.
It kind of never redoes it to what you were thinking about with the depot or whatever. It might not even get passed through right at all at that point.
That's still really up in the air.
Yeah,
Still, we
Yeah,
know
there's a
it's
lot
so
to go on
great.
there.
We have very little concerns at that point.
We know it's so.
Russ is doing his job
gonna
trying
be
to make this.
rebuilt.
Just so Heber City knows, and the clock's ticking. I told the contractor to just proceed. I'm not stopping anything. I'm not doing anything until I get more information. So, you know, water lines are gonna go in, and, you know, power lines are gonna go in, and the train's gonna have to pay to move all that stuff if they don't get us exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Going in based on the agreement that was in place when you went forward, and
We've
I'm,
had
Makes
2
sense.
months now, we're waiting on a final design, 2 months, and I keep pushing Mark, things are going to proceed unless
Yeah,
you
you're
get a
losing your
design
window.
ready here, and it'll cost you more to do it later, so we really need to get that done, but he has hired,
not only cost more, but he might be told
as
no.
well as the contractor that I understand is on tap, you know, that has done these things before. So it's, you know, topography, it's a survey, it's a final design that we're looking for.
Okay, and that would be my report.
All right, everybody, if you don't mind, we will take a break for the next 20 minutes. We'll start up at 6 o'clock, and we do not have any other business except for the public. right? Okay, so we'll pause the meeting for now and be back here at 6 o'clock.
Jason, I talked to Bart about this the other day. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
To you attendees online, I'm going to go ahead and mute the line or disconnect audio for now. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Guess I'll have, I shouldn't, but I guess I will.
Welcome back, and we're getting ready for a public hearing with Heber Light and Power. Hey, Mark, are you online still? Can you hear us?
Yeah, 'cause Jillian will be picking up the pace here for us. If he can.
There we go. You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you, sir.
Mark, can you increase your volume,
Perfect.
please?
I can try. I can try to speak up a little bit more.
That's better. That's
Um,
good.
Is that good? Okay. What I'm worried about is when they announce plane flight. So what I'll try to do is put myself on mute. So I may end up going silent for a short time periodically, just so you're aware of that.
That's fine. No worries. We'll let Jillian take over when that happens, if that's all right.
Oh,
Let me see.
absolutely.
Everyone that's here, can you hear this consultant that we have to present tonight? Can you say something again, please, Mark?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, can everyone hear? Is there any way we can?
Hello.
Yes, we
Try
can
one
hear
more
you.
time. Try one more time, Mark.
All right. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Hey, Mark, if you're on a speakerphone, maybe you could speak directly into the mic itself or take yourself off speaker since you're just on a phone. Or if you're on any kind of headphones, it might be
Well,
better to talk.
I got my earpods in. You think that could be what's causing it?
Do muffle audio. So if you can talk directly into the phone, that would be best.
Okay, let me go ahead and do that. I'll take myself out the earpods.
Microphones can increase the volume.
There we go.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Way better.
Yes. Now wait, we can, but how about you, Riley? Can you hear? Can you test one more time, please, Mark?
Yep. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Good. Okay, that's very good. Good job. All right, everyone. It's now 5:57. We'll start in just a few more minutes, everyone.
Hi, I'm on here too.
Thanks,
Oh, thank you,
Jillian.
Jillian, do you want to do a test for us too, please?
Yeah, I can test. Do you want my camera? My camera.
Riley, can you hear? Jillian? Okay. It looks like we're doing good then. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yes.
So, Joe, you may have to take over for me if the speaker goes on. They announce a flight. So.
Okay. No problem.
Say it again.
Just wait a second. Flight announcements aren't that low.
Thank you. Please come in. There's more chairs over here if you would like. Okay, we are ready to get started, everyone. Today is February 26, 2025. This is a meeting of the Heber Light and Power Board. I want to welcome all the board members here, including Sid Ostergaard, Brenda Christensen, myself, Heidi Franco, Aaron Cheatwood, Kendall Crittenden, and Kevin Payne. We have many citizens here that have taken their time to come, and we really appreciate that. We're going to have a public hearing with 2 presentations on the rate increases and the rate implementation that's been presented in the agenda materials and have been on the website. We apologize that that was not posted at the same time the postcards went out, but it has been there throughout this week, as well as I'm hopeful last week, through most of last week on this presentation. Everyone, the first presenter today is Mr. Bill Goodall, who's going to take a few minutes to talk about his study, his thorough study of the rate presentation. Bill lives in Interlaken, and he's very concerned, obviously, about Heber Light and Power, and has been so for several years. So he's asked to present first, or at least I've let him present first, because then our consultant, Mark Beauchamps, who's with Utility Financial Solutions, a national consultant back east that has been doing our rate studies for the last few years. Then Mr. Beauchamps and his assistant Jillian is going to present on the actual rate proposal that they are doing. Just so you know, Mr. Beauchamps is looking at revenue requirements that Heber Light and Power needs to be self-sustaining. He's looking at all the different rate classes that we have for different different categories of charges. He's looking to see if there's any cross subsidies within those charges, what rate adjustments he's going to be proposing, as well as the appropriate monthly charges that are being proposed in the rate increases. So, Mr. Goodall, thank you for joining us, and I do appreciate all the time that you spent to email the board and to meet with Mr. Beauchamps and make your presentation now. So we'll turn it to you.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be here tonight. For those of us that have not met, I am Bill Goodall. I have a fairly extensive business background, financial background, mostly in manufacturing, and I think a reasonable working knowledge of Heber Light and Power's financial system. We've spent a lot of time together over the years, not the past few years, but I've been busy skiing and hiking and traveling, but so some of you we haven't met, and some of us, like me, are getting a little grayer, and we got the hearing aids now, so we can hear our wives. Jason's hair looks exactly the same, so having aged now. So there are a number of people that know that I've had quite a history with HLD, and so when something like a rate increase like this comes up, I get contacted by people and they ask fundamentally 2 questions. Is it necessary? And is it fair? Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. And if some of this is a little bit based on assumptions, and I'll tell you what those are. But if for some reason I say something you disagree with and you want to talk about it, interrupt me. So what I looked at was the presentation that's online, as well as some of the current and past financial data you relate to. And the first question that I came to was, does the rate study include payments? Because I couldn't find it. And that was a little bit shocking. I mean, you can't, it would be unreasonable to have a study that didn't include paying off the debt. Well, here it is. It's hidden in interest on the debt. It took me 2 days to find that. So we'll go on from there. Next. And Colby, thank you for getting that loan from me. I appreciate it. And then the next question that I tried to look at is, are these rate increases really necessary? And some of this information I put together to help explain this to others, and you've all seen it, but I'm going to go through it quickly. If you look at where we were at the end of 2024 in sales at 27 million, and then you add on the assumptions, and I think they're reasonable, of 19% growth, 26% inflation over the next 5 years, and then the study assumes 27% price increase over the next 5 years. Where do you end up? You end up at $7.4 million of operating income. Well, at that point, the company's going to have $88 million worth of debt, and just the cost of financing that debt is somewhere around $8 million. So it's not unreasonable to say that level of goal makes sense. And the, I'm sorry, $3.8 million. But, what we see here is the effect of growth in terms of operating income is fairly limited, and you can debate that, and Mr. Botiep and I did last night. How much of that actually comes down to the bottom line? How much of it is paid, sucked up into variable costs? How much of it is sucked up into some overhead costs? But this increase in income due to growth only goes maybe 10%, some people would say 20, some would say 30, but it certainly doesn't all go down to the bottom line. So what do we end up with? We end up with sales revenue of about $40 million, operating income before depreciation, which is how much money the company is generating to make investments, of $3.8 million paid debt, $3.8 million. There's $85 million of capital investment. And we're going to talk about that for just a minute. You'll end up with just under $100 million of bond debt with an average interest of $5 million and average principal of $4 million. So that's $9 million a year that Heber Light and Power will be paying for the next 25 years. And in order to finance that, the rate study price increase next year of 13%, 27% over the next 5 years. So that's all information that you've all seen. This is kind of all of that on one short Craig's notes somewhere. Now, so if we could slide that up a little, here's the answer. The answer that I came to is it necessary? Yes. But let's all understand. Maybe you take worst case growth assumption. Okay? And that's what Jason and his staff have to do. They have to assume growth is going to happen the way people are talking about it, and they have to prepare you and the public to pay for it. Now, if it ends up being less than that, then there are options. But based on the assumptions of growth, especially, and the assumptions of $85 million worth of capital investment and the debt that it's going to accumulate, I believe that this price rate increase study is correct. Now, let's move on. And it took me a little while to come to that conclusion. Okay, the third question, and this is the one about, is it fair? Are the costs equitable? The price increases and the result cost equitable for existing ratepayers versus for the people that are, in other words, who should pay for this? And how do you figure out what the right answer is to that? And I have to thank Mark Beauchamp, who's on there. He and I spent an hour together last night going through these models in a lot of detail and talking about this very specific topic. He was in Guam last night while we were talking. I think he's in Korea today. So he's a busy guy, but he found time. If you look at how can you determine what's equitable in terms of impact fee versus electric rates, there are two different ways to pay for this investment. One of them is by having the new property owners pay impact fees and using that money to pay for some of the infrastructure. The other one is to have existing and new ratepayers pay more money, higher rates, and use that to pay for that infrastructure. And obviously, what this study includes is a mixture of both of those. What's fair? There's $80 million of growth capital being added, and if you value that in terms of principal and interest, that's about $7 million of principal and interest a year. Or you can value it in terms of this will have about a 20-year life. 20 years from now, some of this stuff is going to be in place. So it's kind of average cost per year is something like $4 million. So it seems to me, in the rate study assumes $3 million a year in impact fees. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think they're quite high enough. I think a little bit more should be covered by impact fees. And what it, as you'll see in a minute, that doesn't change, unfortunately, the rate increase. So recent years, you've enjoyed impact fees of 4.1 million in 23 and 4.9 million this past year. I almost got excited when I saw the end of November financials. It said 9 million, but no, that wasn't quite. But I thought, wow, this is something that I pushed this company about 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Jason, I don't remember. The impact fees aren't high enough. The new property owners aren't paying their fair share. And so it's nice to see that it got all the way up to $5 million. So let me see what I have done. If we were to raise the impact fee just a little bit. Last night we went through a couple of models with Mr. Coucil, and he and I may not entirely agree on this one, but if the impact fees were raised to $4 million in assumptions, which I think is reasonable given the history, that $25 million on that could be 20 million. Wouldn't affect the rate increase, and that's what we're here to talk about. So as you get around to the impact study, and you start having that discussion, I would urge you to take that model and play around with a few assumptions about impact fees, because they won't necessarily change the rate increase amount, which is what you're here to discuss tonight, but they could affect how much you borrow. Okay? And I think that, let me put it this way, when I was in manufacturing, the easiest way, the nicest place to reduce costs was in scrap. Less material, less stuff thrown away, less money spent, but everybody still has their job. To do it in productivity, you might have to lay some people off. Well, your scrap is interest. And it's the easiest, kindest way for you folks to find ways to reduce expenses. And so, for example, if we take that $5 million out of there, it saves a little under $500,000 a year. If I was to come to you and say, well, take out $500,000 worth of personnel costs, what would you say, Jason? No, I mean, no, absolutely not. Okay. But here's an opportunity to get the same thing and not impact the operation. And that's the part where you have to, and that's what I wanted to talk, why I wanted to talk to you tonight. So if you look at this whole thing, I think that there's some ways that you could make it a little bit more equitable than the current assumption. And some of these, you know, you're interested in, some of them you're not, but here's some ideas. Obviously, the 27% rate increase over this time does not address ratepayer equity. Sorry, but the ratepayers are going to pay. However, if we raise the impact fees to $5 million, okay, it contributes $10 million over this time by the new property owner rather than the ratepayer. Now, there are statutory limitations on what you do with impact fees. I sincerely doubt the law will let you go any higher than that, but it is an option to help with the equity a little bit. Here's one that caught at least one person's attention. My suggestion is, I'm assuming that most of that $80 million, $60 million of this growth capital, according to the plan. You have to dig to find it, but that's about what the number is. I'm assuming, and I don't know this because I haven't gone through every project, that it's for annexation. Is that reasonable? Huh? Okay. So let's let Heber help. They're going to get the taxes. Let's have them pay $1 million a year in interest. They can't pay for any of the capital, but they can help with the interest cost. Okay, so you know, if you look at that, and we can get $4 or $5 million a year in impact fees, and maybe $1 million from Heber, we go back and we say, well, what's the added incremental interest and depreciation? We just covered it. And so as time goes on and those new ratepayers start moving in, there'll be more people to pay rates, and that will eventually cover the rest of it. But this, for the next 5 years, would cover that increment. Another thing that will help would be to minimize bond debt. I mean, you're sitting on $22 million worth of cash right now, you know, $46 million worth of debt, almost $5 million a year of interest and principal. And what happened with the model that you use for capital budgeting and impact fee budgeting is a result of having to assume sort of the worst growth. Put together a plan to need to borrow next year, have enough cash around to cover this, and then it doesn't all happen. And how many years has that been? Usually, like last year, I think the budget was 31 million, capital, and you spent 21 million. So what happens is you go out, you borrow that money, and then you pay interest on it. You're not using it for the growth, you're just sitting there waiting. And you know, I get it, that's more comfortable, there's no risk involved, but somebody's paying that. So I would say that one of the things that you could do always, go through that list and say, is it really needed? Do we absolutely have to do this? Let's take it out. I assume you've already done that. But, okay. Second one is either reduce or delay bonds. And that's where this thing that I'm suggesting to you as you get into the impact study, play around with those models a little bit. I think you can reduce the bonds by taking advantage of what you've done with impact fees. But the second thing is wait until the money is absolutely needed. If you can take that $20 million bond and delay it a month, saves $150,000. If you can take that $20 million bond and make it $10 million, saves $1 million a year. So the one thing that you as the board can do at that point is go ahead and approve the plan. I mean, if that's what's going to happen, they're going to need the money. But let's wait and see what happens before we pull the trigger. Okay? And the more you can push those bonds out, and a little bit less you can make them, it's significant money, at least my belief. Yeah. And then there's one more. If you want to avoid all of this, turn that territory back to Rocky Mountain Power. And I know that's kind of a little off the wall, but what happened was when the map was negotiated back in, what was it, 22, Kendall?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
There was an agreement made that any land annexed by Heber would become part of the territory of Heber Light and Power.
Part of that.
Yeah. So part of this, so a bunch of this investment, I can't tell you how much because I haven't.
2019, I think is when that happened.
Okay. So I think it was finished in 22, but it's whatever.
Yeah.
Done a while. A lot of this investment and a considerable amount of the price increase is to provide infrastructure for all of that in the annexed area. Now, you'd have to go back to the state, you'd have to probably pay a whole bunch of money to the lawyers, but I mean, if the community absolutely will not support this, Heber Light and Power's position as an independent function would be, nope, we're giving it back to Rocky Mountain Power, let it be their problem. I don't recommend it, I'm just trying to.
Would they take it back?
They probably would make an offer to buy Heber Light and Power instead, but, you know, trying to be realistic. So one more. So conclusion. It's based on a very aggressive capital investment. It's based on assumed growth and investment. And given that, the rate increases are correct. We can do the math 15 different ways, and I'll tell you, Mr. Beauchamp has a very, very elegant model that he's developed. And if he and I had the time, we probably would have spent 6 hours last night talking about it, because we kind of get into that crap stuff. However, investment should actually be made only when it's really required, and debt can be minimized. And if you put the word scrap in there or waste, it can be minimized by carefully monitoring the capital needs and the sales of bonds. And I would suggest that you only sell as much as you need, and you only sell it when you absolutely need it. Okay? And there you go. I do want to make a quick comment about time of use on here, and then we'll see if there are any questions. I'm a big fan of time of use rates. We are a solar residence, and we're on time of use now. For the people that really understand the sort of the Dutch demand model, it makes absolute sense. And this is an opportunity from a ratepayer perspective, for ratepayers to save some money. Well, at the same time, it helps Heber Light and Power even out their load. And what we understand is that they can forecast, and they do a great job, and Emily Grant and others do that very well. But there are going to be days when it's exceptionally hot and the air conditioning is way up there, and they have to buy electricity from the market, which costs more. So on those days, if we're not overloading them, we can help them kind of level out that load and help them avoid buying from the market. So it's a kind of a win-win thing. That's my comment. Now, questions about what I just talked about? Was that too much information? Sorry. All right, I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So,
By the way, hi Sid, we haven't met.
so Jason, describe impact fees and what what we can actually do per state code and all that, and percentage, and basically are our hands tied with raising impact fee based on.
When we do our last study, wasn't it just
Last year.
last year?
We raised them last year and the year before that, and I think the year before that, and we want to do it now again this year.
So yeah, we did an impact fee study in 2024. And, this is where it really is a catch-22 in some ways, because for the impact fee study, you're forecasting the very worst capital costs so that you're able to calculate the impact fee studies at what that capital could ultimately end up costing you with the growth. So that capital plan, like Bill mentioned, is the worst case scenario. I mean, that is. I mean, if the growth continues to hit us at the rate it's doing, then we've got to build that capital out just as fast as we possibly can. And that's how you calculate what the impact is of a new customer. And we are currently charging the highest, the amount that we can charge per amp, per connected amp on our system. So a customer asks for 100 amp service, they pay that highest amount we can charge per state code, state law on the electric impact fees. And we're currently, I mean, out of all of the, public power organizations in the state, when we surveyed them in 2024, they are charging the highest impact fees in the state of Utah. And so incrementally, each year we're going to study this because we continue to grow at such a rapid rate. And with that, we also, update the cost of what that capital is going to be through various engineering studies and getting latest pricing from vendors so that capital plan is as accurate as it possibly can on the forecast. We're only allowed to do the 6-year window according to the statute. And So our capital plan might be go out 10 years because that's what it needs to do. But for the impact fee study, we're only allowed that 6-year window of what that impact fee is going to do and the work that you're going to do to fill those loads in that 6-year window.
If I can piggyback on the question. So understanding that the impact fees were always behind the 8 ball in terms of by the time the study is done, when it could be implemented. Have we been doing that, an update every year? Yeah. Okay, so my question. Okay.
Not before.
So my question is this. Does it make sense to do it twice a year? And the only reason I'm just throwing this out there is, again, because of that time delay and the lag, is it worth, yes, there's going to be a cost to do this, do the study, but is the potential to increase and get that extra 6 months rather than sitting and waiting for 12 months?
All right. I know you addressed it.
I'll just anybody. Yeah.
Well, realize one thing. When you're looking at impact fees, you're looking at capital growth investment that's going to happen in the future. Okay. Until that capital growth and investment happens, nobody's going to move into that house or that business or whatever.
Well, they're not gonna pay the
Have to
fee.
pay for it before we get the money.
Right. So that impact fee increase decision is going to happen well before they're moving in. Okay. So in terms of timing, the kind of oh gee, let's rush to do this a couple times a year. Probably I can't see how that would help anything. And remember one other thing about this too, as you're planning and looking out at this long range, like 10 years, like Jason suggested, those impact fees will carry on for years as all of those people move into that territory. Okay, so they're going to help, with this for quite some time into the future. And I can't, one more and then I'm going to sit down. Mr. Bochap is going to talk next. He was concerned that my discussion was going to get you talking about impact fees rather than rates. For tonight, I know you're focused on rates. So my apologies for bringing up impact fees.
But it was good because I wanted Jason to verify that what we're doing at Heber Power.
Well, there's been some public comment that we aren't charging enough impact.
I'd like at the same time, if I
That
don't
need to be out there.
what is your opinion on it? Because again, if we're looking at, here's how I'm looking at it. If we're doing the update once a year and we're getting increases out of that, okay? That just begs the question of, does it make sense? And I'm not saying I have the answer that's yes or no, but does it make sense to do it more frequently? And therefore, we're getting more increases rather than waiting, 12 months. If it's not worth it, yeah, I'm not interested if it's not worth it, but if we're gonna get some incremental increases to what we're allowed to collect.
Every study's different, and it just, like one of the big questions in the capital plan right now is independence. You have discussions with that developer that independence is gonna, blow up and, go as fast as this North Village area is. So, if you could, firm up some of that stuff and actually know what's going to happen on the east side of the valley there, then you could build that into the capital plan, and that might be a substantial change in the capital plan that would, possibly raise impact fees another 10%. But if you're just going with not much change in the capital plan itself, then, are you even going to get back what it costs to do the study and to do the engineering analysis and those types of things? So I think, we discuss this stuff, multiple times a year here at the board level. I think that, we just gotta be, really proper in how we analyze the discussions that go on that lead to the big growth. And then, if that's coming on and there is a significant change in the capital plan, then absolutely, we fire off an impact fee study immediately.
Ballpark. What does it cost?
Each impact fee study for consultation, engineering, probably staff costs, we're probably looking in the neighborhood of 60 to 75,000.
I can two more comments and then I'm gonna shut up unless you ask me a question.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. What I'm saying, I said that for a reason because they depreciate their equipment over 20 years. And as a result, we assume based on a whole lot of accounting studies and a whole bunch of different industries that a reasonable life for equipment is about 20 years. For a vehicle, they depreciate that over like 3 or 4 years. It's not the same for all of them. I kind of use that as an industry standard of thumb. Okay. First of all, I just want to say that we did discuss whether there was statutory room to increase
Excuse me,
impact
one
fees.
thing, could we get your name, please, for the record on the question? Oh, thank you, Jamie.
Have we opened up for public comment yet?
No, she was just asking him a question, but go ahead, Bill, and then we need to move
We
on
did
with
look
Mr.
at
Beauchamp.
it, and there is room for 4 and maybe to 5, and you're going to get to that tonight about rate studies. You're going to get to impact fees. All I hope I've done is opened your eyes to see there is sort of a way to decide whether they are equitable or not, and how much they really could be. So you as a board are informed and can use that to make decisions.
But I think it was great for Jason to, say what he said, and we are charging the highest.
Yes.
Now, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
we are doing all we can
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
So the public needs to understand.
And I'll tell you that at a point in the past, a board of a bunch of mayors and council people basically said, growth is wonderful. Don't charge impact fees.
Yeah.
Well, that's changed quite a bit. So
Exactly.
kudos to you guys for making those decisions.
Right, right, and
Thanks,
that,
Bill.
and if you don't mind,
Can you ask the question?
one more, because we do need to, otherwise you're going to be here all night, all right? Sir, why don't you state your name, please?
Jim Church, 2 real quick questions. The 20% inflation figure and what we currently paying on our bond, what's our current bond rate?
Our bond rate is like 3.5%. Okay. The inflation figure, that's over.
I think it was 20%.
You had
That's over
said
5 years.
over 5 years.
Okay. So about 4% a year. 3.5, I think, is the actual.
We can only hope on that one.
Thanks again.
Thanks,
for taking the time.
Everyone, just to be clear, based on what Mr. Ostergaard said here, since I became chair a little over 3 years ago, I've made sure that we do charge the maximum amount of impact fees. And we've done those studies because we have been in the hole when it comes to impact fees. And we've been kind of holding on to them and letting general fund, before this came along, that many years ago, we were letting the general fund subsidize the growth. And we weren't charging the highest impact fees because it was a different era. And like Mr. Goodall said, previous mayors, previous boards here have said, well, we'll subsidize growth. I didn't know that until 10 years ago when I was on this board, 11 years ago. No, 12, almost 11 years ago. And then I caused a fuss about it and got kicked off way back then. Okay, now things have changed, right? And so we do want to make sure that we're spending the impact fees as soon as we get them for the impact fee eligible projects. And you can see that in our financial statements that we have very minimal amount of impact fees that we hold on to. We're getting that 4 million plus in a year, and we're immediately spending it for those impact fee eligible projects. The only way we can charge more, though, is if there's more growth and more capital projects than what we planned for last year, which looks like it'll happen. So the impact fees could increase again this year. we have to do this study first before we can do the impact fee study again. Okay, so I hope that clears up. We're really not trying to subsidize growth right now because we're on hyper growth in our valley. Okay, Mr. Beauchamps, thank you for joining us from Korea. We're going to turn the time over to you. Please go ahead, you and Jillian.
Hey, Mark,
Oh,
you're muted.
Thank you, Jillian.
There.
There you go.
There you go, Mark.
Okay, good. I'm going to try to mute my microphone. I'm in an airport, just so everybody's aware. And every so often they announce a flight departure. So I'll try to mute my mic because it is pretty loud. So, but I first want to thank Bill for his insightful comments and how thorough he was in his review of our study. And I really enjoyed working with him and talking to him yesterday and going through our models with him. And he came up with several, I think, excellent considerations moving forward. And anyway, I want to thank you, Bill, for that work. That was excellent. So what I'm here, I first want to tell you a little bit about Utility Financial Solutions. But before I do that, I have with me Jillian Jursic, who actually did most of the work, and so she knows more of the details behind the studies. But I want to tell you a little bit more about us. We've been in business for 24 years, providing financial planning and cost of service studies for utilities, electric, water, wastewater, and gas utilities around the country. We've done work in 45 states and several Caribbean islands and the islands of Barbados, Bermuda, and Guam. That's why I'm out in Korea right now, because I was traveling back and forth from Guam. So Jill, could you go to the second slide? All right. Now, when we do a study, the first thing we do is a long-term financial projection. What you're seeing is a 5-year projection. Our models actually run out like 30 years, but the reality of when you do a projection, it's based on a lot of assumptions that you're going to see. And the only thing we're certain of, especially when you get out 2, 3, 4 years, that the only thing we're certain of with the projections are going to be wrong. And I know that sounds funny, but if I could predict the future with that accuracy, I'd probably wouldn't be doing this job. But the good thing about Heber Light and Power is they update these studies regularly. So as new and better information comes in, we're able to plug that into our models and regenerate the forecast based on more current data. So that financial projection, and I'm going to go through the key targets for utilities that we look at to assess their financial health. Once that's complete, we do what's called a cost of service study. And that's different from a financial projection in that we look at how much it costs to provide service to each class of customers based upon their usage patterns, how much of the different parts of the infrastructure they're consuming or using, how much they're contributing to the peak demands on the power supply and the transmission. And in the end, it shows how much it costs to provide service to each class. And it compares it to the projected revenue we used, and it shows how each class should theoretically change to meet cost of service requirements. I will say this, it's a guideline that we use in the last process, the cost of service study is. Because in the rate design piece, the number one thing with rate design is we want to be able to meet those revenue requirements that Bill had talked about for the utility. So the utility has a money to pay their bills in a timely fashion. But the other part of it is using the cost of service study
to move each rate class closer to the full cost of providing the service. And that's what I'm going to talk about today primarily is, and that's what we're proposing is different rates and new rates. And we projected that we need a 13% increase this upcoming year, followed by 3.5% increases. Now, because the increases are double digit, that was driven a lot by the inflationary adjustments that have been occurring, especially in the electric construction costs and the electric industry in general, to try to get us back on par. We didn't want to create or implement dramatic new rate structural changes because we didn't want to because whenever we make structural changes in our rates, what I mean by structural changes is we're going to talk about time of use rates. Well, as we move toward time of use from the current 2-block tiered structure, we would see some winners and some losers, and we don't want to exacerbate that 13% adjustment in the first year. So we did those more dramatic changes in the second and third years. So, so with that, Jill, could you go to the next slide? This slide is the power cost adjustment that was implemented a couple years ago. Because, again, we're having a 13% increase, we want to suspend the power cost adjustment until the second year in the study. We'd put the power cost adjustment back in place. Again, because we don't want to make the 13% higher. So that gives the ratepayers some stability. The other part of it, and this is not really, well, the base, in other words, how much we're actually recovering in power cost in the rates, we're actually changing that slightly also. But Joe, you can go to the next slide. And these are the assumptions that we used in building the model. And if you look at the second column, first has calendar year, and next to that is inflation. And we assumed an 8.4% inflation rate for 2024, followed by 6.6% and 3%. Then the growth in the system, or the growth in the number of customers, accounts, and usage. We projected a 2% growth in 24, 5% in 25, 2.3% in 26, and then 4.6 followed by 2-3% growth rates. And then purchase power costs, they changed about 7.7% in 24, and we're projecting an additional 5.2. And you can see how the power costs are changing. Power costs are more market driven, so we don't really have a lot of control over that. So ULAMPS does a great job of projecting it for us. And it's those projections that we're actually using for the change in power supply cost. Then you have the capital improvement plan. You can see that each year we're spending anywhere from 13 million to 25 million. And I think the total of this plan is around 86 million. The last column, and this is what Bill was referring to, is the impact fees. Because we projected in 24, we actually recovered about 4.7 million in impact fees. And in our projection, we were conservative in projecting 3 million. We're hoping it to be more. Excuse me,
Mark, if you keep talking through it, it doesn't pick up the announcement.
Oh,
We can
okay.
hear you.
They had to do it in Korean and then English, So, double.
So Mark was saying that we're hoping the impact fees will come in higher than the 3 million, but to be conservative and make sure that we're not over projecting what's coming in on impact fees, because we don't always know for sure. It's not necessarily a one-to-one on our spending versus what impact fees are actually coming in the next fiscal year. We're using $3 million to be more conservative on the revenue side.
Jillian, if you don't mind me asking a question there, it seems like with the projected growth that there would be a correlation between growth and impact fees more than just having a flat number on the impact fees. Have you ever seen any studies on that, of the projected growth and the correlation to impact fee receipts?
We normally look at kind of like a weighted average, but in an effort to be in line with our budgets, and looking back over the last 5-year period, the $3 million felt a little bit more comfortable. We did run the projection with $4 million, and theoretically we should see them start to tick up over time. But again, because you update your studies regularly, we wanted to make sure that we were being conservative.
Okay, but theoretically and realistically, that number should increase with growth, much more than that. Anyway.
Yes, that's the hope. Yes.
Yes, please continue. And Mark, are you able to speak now?
Oh, there we go. Yep, I'm back. I'll tell you another reason why we were conservative, and I'm gonna first tell you a story. Well, actually, I'll close with a story on that. But we were conservative in the impact fees for a reason, because if a lot of utilities, like I'm gonna go to Michigan, my home state, in the Detroit area back in the late 90s, there was extreme growth in that area. And so these utilities are building out their infrastructure, and their intent to pay for it was through impact fees. And then, of course, everything slowed down. And these utilities had difficulty paying the bills back, and it affected their bond ratings. So whenever we do an impact fees, and it kind of responds to what you had asked earlier, we did initially run a corresponding impact fee with the growth that we had in the model. And it did produce anywhere from $5 million approximately average a year in impact fees. But for projection purposes and rate setting purposes, we were intentionally conservative. Now, obviously, we ran several scenarios, because the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want existing ratepayers subsidizing growth. So the rate adjustments that we set, and we have a way of monitoring how much truly does it cost to provide service just to the existing ratepayers. And we did not exceed that target. So like I said, for projection purposes, we were conservative. The capital plan, I also want to emphasize another part of that. When we did the impact fee study, these are the capital improvements that we were provided. And those were submitted to the state to justify the impact fees that were established. And if we were to change that projection, I'm afraid it could cause us issues with the state. So, but I think Bill makes a good point, his Heber City Light and Power's policy historically has, they try not to spend substantial amounts in capital unless they're actually seeing the growth. There's no way they can time it perfectly. It's got to be planned in advance, but they try to make it some correlation. So it's possible some of these plans will be deferred till future times. So, and I know I spent a lot of time on these assumptions, but I really want everybody to understand, how these were derived. So is there any question? Oh, let me continue. The next slide.
You'll just hold on.
This slide shows the financial projection over the next 5 years without any rate adjustments. You see in the second column, it says projected rate adjustment 0. Now, I want to go through a summary of those 3 key financial targets. The first one you see is debt coverage ratio. The debt coverage ratio, when we issue debt, we issue a bond ordinance. And as part of that bond ordinance, it requires us to maintain certain debt coverage ratio requirements. And if we violate that debt covenant, we're in technical default on the debt. And based on this projection, our debt coverage ratios would be in violation of the bond covenants. And what we like to see is a debt coverage ratio that exceeds a 1.4 multiplier, when in reality you can see we're substantially below that without rate adjustments. The second major part of this target is cash reserves. If you look in the far right column, we identify what we call a minimum level of cash the utility should maintain. That they need to maintain that level of cash so they can pay the bills in a timely fashion. Because there's always what's called a working capital lag, a timing difference between when they pay a bill and get the money from customers. So we compare that minimum cash with the projected cash balances. And you can see that currently in 2025, without any rate adjustments, we're looking at 26 million. But then in 26, we're projected a $12 million cash reduction and another $2 million in 27, and then in 28 actually being negative in our cash reserves. And that's inclusive of the bond issuances that I show below, the 26 million, the 10 million, and the 18. So, Jill, if you want to go to the next slide. The next slide, slide number 6, is the projected rate track of 13%, followed by a series of 3.5% adjustments. Now, if you look at the debt coverage ratio, the minimum target that we use is a 1.4, but the bond covenants specify like a 1.2, and before we're actually in technical default. Even with this adjustment in the first year, we're still falling negative or below that target. In 26, we go to 1.37, which is close, and then we are above that target, that minimum target, in all the subsequent years. Then you got the cash reserves, which is over on the right-hand side. You can see on the projected cash balances, it would go up to about 29 million, 30 million from that 26. And it kind of bounces around each year depending on various factors. One of them is a capital plan. And it stabilizes in the low 20s. So, and as I mentioned, usually when we do a financial model, the first 2 or 3 years from our projections are usually pretty close. Years 4 and 5, you know, we're putting rate adjustments in there, but they're just more placeholders because the study will be updated and those will be evaluated for 2028 and 2029. So the next slide, I'm gonna mainly on the next 6 slides, I'm gonna cover more of the graphs that than I am the detailed numbers. But the first one is titled A Closer Look at Cash. And this is just taking those cash numbers and cash projections and showing the comparison. If you look at the brown line, that's the minimum level of cash. So in other words, we want to be above that line. If you look at the blue line, you can see that our cash is falling and is well below that minimum target. And with the rate track that we propose, you can see we're just hovering just slightly above. So if you want to go 2 slides from there, the debt coverage ratio, you can see the brown line again is what our minimum target is, 1.4. The blue line is what it would be without any rate adjustments or well below it. And the green line is what our debt coverage ratios would be based on the projections, and they're slightly above. If you want to go 3 more slides, this is
Mark?
the adjusted up. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Mark, just to clarify on this chart, thank you, Jillian. The blue line is no adjustment and doing the borrowing that's being proposed for the capital facilities plan? Because right now you're showing the green line with adjustment and bonds. So is the blue line with no rate increase, but trying to still borrow that 26 million this year?
It is. It's with the borrowing also.
Thank you.
Yeah. The last one is the operating income target, and I didn't really discuss it much, but what we do is we look at the theoretical number that we would need to charge to fully meet revenue requirements. And when I say that, by that, it's a different type of way of looking at it. So if the utility puts $1 million of assets in service with a 20-year life, every year they expense $50,000 of depreciation expense. And theoretically, of course, it's a non-cash expenditure, and this is a different way of looking at it. But over that 20-year period, we would recover back that $1 million. But then the asset needs to be replaced. And when we go to replace it, it's going to cost more than what we originally paid. So the target operating income represents the inflationary increase in the replacement cost of the infrastructure. And that becomes the ultimate target. And we look at that, but right now we're using it. It depends where the utility is in their cycle as to how important it becomes to us. But we're not really using this one in this study. So Jill, you want to go 2 more slides to the electric cost of service results? Okay.
Yep.
Now I want to tell you how to read this. If you look at the very bottom, it says that for us to fully meet the revenue requirements, in other words, hit that target operating income, we would need to have a 14.8% increase. We're not proposing that, we're proposing 13. But what we use this for is when we compare that 14.8 average increase to the percent changes in each class, it gives us an indication as to how close each class is to the cost of service requirements. So if you look at like the residential class, which is the third one from the bottom, it's the biggest big class, it shows 14.6 compared to the average of 14.8, virtually identical. So that class is right at cost of service. We just need to keep it there. Then we look at some like residential pumping shows a 64% increase. Very large class, a very small class with a large adjustment. General service pumping, medium general service in the middle, 37%. So it gives us guidance as to how we need to change the rates. All right. And we combine that with the next slide. The next slide is the monthly customer charge. And, the monthly charge, that fixed charge, is probably one of the most least understood charges that utilities have, no matter what utility, electric, water, wastewater, gas. They have that fixed charge every month. And it's hard sometimes for customers to say what's the justification for it. They think about like a Dunkin' Donuts, for example. They don't charge you to walk through the door. Why does an electric utility have to charge you a fixed charge every month? Well, the difference is a Dunkin' Donuts makes an investment on behalf of the community, whereas an electric utility makes an investment specifically for every single customer they serve. In other words, there's a meter on everybody's facility, and the utility had the cost to install the meter. the responsibility to repair it, to replace it, to read the meter every month, to send the customer a bill, and the cost to maintain the service drop. Those are fixed costs that do not vary based on consumption. And if we don't charge the proper customer charge, we still have to recover the revenue requirement for it. So it gets rolled into energy. So it creates subsidization between different types of users within that class. So in an ideal world, if you look at the residential class, you're currently charging $17.90. The cost of service study says it should be $22.73. Now we're not proposing to go from the $17.90 to $22. This is giving us the guidance, and what you're going to see is like a 50-cent increase in the fixed monthly charge each year. Kind of move in that direction. All right. So now let's go to the rate design samples. Slide 17, which is a summary of all the rate adjustments. So if you look at like projected percentage change in year one, down at the bottom it says 13%. You can see residential's pretty much right at the average. Most of them are fairly close to that 13%, with the exception of one. I'll get to that in a moment. But we're trying to move each class closer to cost of service. So like the 14% large general service, because the indication we got from the cost of service was that they should get a little bit more higher increase than the average. And we followed that throughout the 3-year projection. Then you get into the pumping classes, the residential pumping and the medium general service pumping. You see some negatives, you see some increases. One of the things and I'll get into this when I start talking about the residential rate. Right now, historically in our industry, we have not had the appropriate metering in place to be able to charge customers specifically on how they use electricity. In other words, the times of the day that they use it. Because during the peak hours of the day, it costs Heber Light and Power more money to bring power in to purchase it from the market. So by moving to time of use, we're sending better price signals. And so what you're going to see is what we're proposing, and these are very, very small classes, are time of use rate schedules that we're going to be putting all the pumping rates on, because they have the ability to control their usage pattern. So that right now they don't even think about it. They just fire up their pump whenever they need it. It might be hitting our peak. Well, with a time of use rate, they'll, hopefully be cognizant of it, and where maybe they don't need it. They can fire it up during the lower cost periods. All right. The next slide, which is the residential rate progression. Remember I said when I started was that in year one, we're not proposing the full-time time use rates for residential. That's because we have a 13% increase. We want to minimize the surprises on the customers. But in year two and in year three, what we're proposing when we have the smaller adjustments at 3.5 is to start a slow progressive movement into cost of service direction. So we're proposing time of use rates start in year two, but the differential between on-peak and off-peak is small. It's not fully cost-based at that point. But over time, move it in that direction to give the customers time to adapt and time to purchase the enabling devices that allows them to more conveniently shift their energy to lower cost time periods. So on the next slide, on slide 19, is where you see that actually occurring. The first column is the current rate. Most residential customers have less than 400 amps, so they're charged $17.90 per month fixed charge. We're proposing a 50-cent increase in that rate each year. The the first block rate under the energy chart for the first 1,000 kilowatt hours, it's currently 10.4. We're proposing 11.8. The excess from 12.4 to 14.1. We're not making any significant changes, but in year 2, what you see is all of a sudden it's based on when the energy is being used. So the on-peak rate in the non-summer months and in the summer months is about 14 cents is what we're proposing, and the off-peak rate is 12.2. And in the subsequent year, move them a little bit more. The on-peak rate to 15.6 and the off-peak down a little bit to 12 cents. Again, trying to move in the appropriate direction, and you'll see what the number theoretically should be on the next slide. But before I get there, if you look down below it, we're also proposing one other area, and that is what's called a demand charge. And I know that larger industrial customers, they understand demand. They know what that represents, but smaller residentials don't. But from a cost of service perspective, we have to size our infrastructure to handle a customer's peak demands. So by billing a demand charge, the customers with big demands that have a lot of energy use during any given period of time are being subsidized by people who are smaller users oftentimes that have a more consistent usage pattern. That helps to pick that differential up so that customers start paying the appropriate amount of cost and reduce the subsidization that's occurring within the class. The next slide is the customer impacts. In year 1, the average customer actually uses 871. The average customer, which isn't shown totally on this slide, the impact they're going to see is about $14.60 a month on average will be the increase in year 1, and then $4.60 in years 2 and years 3. That's the average monthly increase that they'll see in their bills. If you go to the next slide, this is the time of use rate. This is what we call the full time of use rate. In other words, over time, where we like to get to with the regular residential. But there are some customers that may want to be on this full time of use price signal, such as if you own an electric vehicle, you can charge at night. And there's substantial savings under this rate by charging during the lower cost time periods. So if you look at the current rate, we had established this a couple of years ago, the on-peak and off-peak, it was 15.2 cents on-peak in the summer and 7.6 and so on. You can see that we're just continuing that movement toward the full time use price signal. And this, in the long term, as I said, is where we would like to see everybody, all the rates be at a rate structure like this. Now, the next slide is the residential pumping. And you can see what we're doing here is we're just taking them. They have their own rate currently. We're just taking them and moving them into the residential pumping class. So that, it's so small, so few customers. Administratively, it's not really worth the effort to have its own separate class. The next slide is the small commercial pumping, where we have more customers. We have 16 customers on this. And by sending them this time of use price signal, we're giving them more control over their charges. In other words, they can actually reduce their bills from what they're currently paying if they use electricity during specific time periods. The next one is the same thing. It's just a medium commercial class. Oh, go ahead.
Mark, I think it would be good to explain to everyone what does on peak mean and what does off peak mean, please.
Yeah, Jill, I don't have the actual time periods in the on and off peak in front of me. If you could look that up.
Yep, I have them up on the screen. Mark, they're on slide 21.
Oh, it's
right
on
there.
slide 21.
Yeah,
Ah,
right
gotcha.
there.
Oh, I see, over in the upper right.
Yeah.
So what we're proposing for on-peak hours is it's over in the upper right, between the hours of 3 p.m. and 10 p.m., Monday through Friday. Those are going to be on-peak hours. All the other hours, including weekends and holidays, are going to be off-peak. So probably about 75% of the hours during the year are going to be low-cost hours. And so subsequently 20-25% of the hours would be at the higher on-peak rates. And by doing that, like I said, we're trying to give customers control. We want to create a situation where it's a win-win for everybody. In other words, the customer wins if they shift their usage because they lower their bill. And Heber Light and Power wins because they don't have to buy that expensive energy. So we're trying to create that win-win scenario. So now if we want to go back to, I believe, the small commercial rate 25. We're not proposing any dramatic changes in the small commercial rate except for one area, and that's in the energy rate. They currently have what's called a declining block rate structure, which means that the first 500 kilowatt hours is priced at a higher rate than the usage above 500. And what we're proposing to do is over the next 3 years to eliminate that blocked rate and price all their energy at the 7.2 cent level. You go to the next one, the medium commercial. Again, we're not proposing any dramatic changes. They'd see a 12.8% rating adjustment in year 1, followed by 3.2% adjustments. But we're basically keeping the same rate structure. And the last slide that I have is a large commercial. This rate, we're trying to put this rate on time of use. So the energy rate, which is currently 5.3 cents, in year 1, we're bringing up to 6.5. But then in years 2 and 3, what you see is, again, a time of use rate structure. And then, of course, they got the demand charges. So with that, I will open it up to, I guess I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I thought you might want to show that percentage slide, the overall percentages. Perhaps I missed it here. I've seen it before. Was that it? Well, no, that was just the overall, but then I thought that we saw, maybe it's down in the other study, the one with the text, right? Let me see if I can find that. Nope. I'm sorry to make everyone wait. I just thought there was another chart.
That's okay.
Really
Do you
explain this.
remember remember what it was saying? And maybe I can hear,
It was
pull it
a
up or
percentage.
remember.
It was percentages for the different amounts, even though, I'm sorry, my tablet decides to keep stopping on me.
Oh,
No,
that's okay.
I think it could be that one. Yeah. See, yours flipped on yours too. Aaron's going to try to find that again.
It looks like it was
Okay.
page 19 of the written study, which I think mirrors, I'm pretty sure mirrors slide 20. Or maybe it's slide 14, that same, what you were looking at.
I think that
Okay,
referred
slide
to,
section.
yes, let's see if that's the one. It's slide. Which one?
Slide 14
Slide 14.
in what you just presented,
Is
and then
that-
I'm gonna find the other one in case the mayor's talking about the other one.
Okay, now, Mark, I don't know if you know this statistic or not, but Sid Ostergaard mentioned it to me before we started tonight. That do you happen to know what the average cost of electricity is per kilowatt as a national average?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I believe it to be about 16, 17 cents. It varies substantially by location. You know,
Sure.
the east part, it's not unusual. It depends on a lot of factors because it can vary it month to month. It can be 20, 25 cents.
Right,
You know, on the West Coast, it's a little bit less. In the center part of the U.S., it's cheaper than it is on the two coasts, with the exception of Washington State. Washington, Oregon's the cheapest because all
U.S.
hydro.
Energy Information Administration.gov says 17.01 cents per kilowatt hour for residential customers.
Yeah.
That's average.
That's what I
Yeah, it
thought
makes
too.
sense. Yeah.
That is not in any way to justify what we're trying to do here, or what we feel like is needed, but just a couple more things for the public to realize before we perhaps dive into your comments. When he is, and this is not the graph I was thinking of, because you showed that earlier, and we're not going to those full percentage change increases. This is just showing it was guidance. So I'm not sure if that was the one I thought I was thinking of, sorry. But I thought there was more of a general summary than the individual slides that we've just gone through. My point
I
is
think it might, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You may be referring to slide 17.
Perhaps, yes, thank you. Thank you. And this is our overall proposal at this time, everyone. Obviously, we can adopt a 3-year schedule of rates right now, but we would definitely review things again next year and the year after that. So my point is the public's probably looking at the tens of millions of dollars that you've shown in cash reserves and as for capital needs, and it's really overwhelming to see those high figures of what growth is costing, as well as why in the world do we need 10 million plus in cash reserves. And everyone, it is good fiduciary responsibility for us as a board we have a policy of 120 days cash on hand. And right now with a 29 some odd $1 million budget, that's a little over 7 million that we just need to have as cash on hand in case, heaven forbid, earthquakes, whatever, natural disaster happens and you're not paying your bills, but we still need to get things put back together and pay our employees. Yes, we've got to have the cash reserve, but then every time our system grows, our cash reserve need grows too, right? Our budget grows, our employees grow over time. We need higher cash reserves. Now you're probably saying, well, look at all those cash reserves that you've got there. Please realize right now that the high majority of the cash reserves that we have are from a past bond, and we haven't spent it yet. So even though our cash reserves might seem pretty high right now, that's money that's already planned to be spent. And even though we've been raising rates these last few years, as well as this proposal and proposals into the future, I want to make sure that we have the cash reserves on hand without borrowing. You see what I mean? Because we're paying interest on cash reserves right now.
I think
just
that's slide number 8. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
Slide number 8. Slide number 8, I believe, is what you're referring to.
Well, I'm sure that it's astounding to look at the millions and millions of dollars and say, why do you need to raise rates on us when you've got that? And that is, those reserves are based on bonding, as you saw in the proposal, as well as the current bonds that we have, that the money is already planned to be spent. Okay, now just a minute. I'm done pretty much. I just thought those were important points to make before we started.
Yeah.
Before I open it up for public comment, Board, is there any other questions or points that you'd like to make before we have the public comment?
I've got one quick question. Mark, this is a question for you, but for the public's benefit. I've been on the board for a year now, and it very much seems like the rate study that is being proposed is a bit of a catch-up attempt. It seems like if we had been, as a board, and we meaning I wasn't here, I'm not actually putting blame anywhere, I'm just trying to understand, if the boards in the past had been raising rates more fluidly, more consistently, we may not see the 13% that we're seeing right now, given the fact that we look at an average age of all the equipment across the company, even the extensive growth that's happened very recently wouldn't have been so much a problem if we had been raising rates consistently over the last couple of years. Whereas this is kind of a catch-up attempt to get us back to a fiscal responsibility where we can be in a good position going forward to provide service to customers going forward. Am I right in thinking about that way?
That is partially correct. And the reason I say partially is the study was done, I believe, 3 years ago, based on projected inflation rates. And we did not assume that inflation was going to be quite as dramatic as it was, and that the upward pressure on replacement costs of things like transformers would be as expensive and increase to the degree it did. I believe transformers increased like 40–50% over that period of time, and the inflation rates were quite high. So and that was part of it. And the other part of it is you're right, we probably could have pushed it more in previous studies. That's correct.
5%.
The only reason I'm asking, Mark, is, you know, the public that's reached out to me directly has largely been concerned with, you know, why wasn't this spread over more years slower so that it's not so much sticker shock today? To which I don't have an answer because I'm new to the board, but my answer has consistently been, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm really glad we know now that there's a problem, because I don't want to be negative cash reserves, which is actually impossible unless we're the government. We can print our own money, which we're not, right? So we can't be negative cash reserves in 3 years. And if we get as low as we're projected to without the rate increase, both on cash reserves and the debt to coverage ratio, correct me if I'm wrong, we put ourselves in a very bad position to potentially ask for more debt in the future if we need to. Meaning that if we don't have the cash reserves and not covering minimums, we're going to get denied for a future bond if we need to.
Well, we'll also.
That's correct.
For existing bonds to be called.
Haven't we been at a 5% increase last several? Didn't we do that after the last
5.5
study?
for the last 3 years. We thought that would be enough to catch us up with inflation and the Ukrainian war and the power prices just going through the roof because of that. But go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, Mark, kind of following on this thought. With the projected cash reserves that you're showing that would get us to the healthy position, can you just kind of shed some light on the impact that would have, both positive and negative, depending upon, you know, which side of the you're looking at, that it would have on our bond rating and therefore ultimate bond rates?
Yeah, the bond ratings, I got to be very general because they take into account a lot of different factors. You know, you have, you know, just the characteristics of the community has a lot of positives that would give you a good bond rating. But outside of what's in the control of the utility, they look at days cash on hand. You know, when you look at a AA rated utility, they traditionally have an excess of 200 days cash. Of course, you're not at that level. But the other one is the debt coverage ratios. And that's why we're front loading the increase to the degree that we are, is because we do not want to violate our bond covenants, because that will affect our bond ratings and will affect future interest rates and our ability to borrow money. So those are the two things from a financial standpoint that you know, the board can do to try to make sure that that bond rating stays high and you're able to get interest rates, you know, good interest rates and a good bond rating.
So, Mark, I apologize to try and put you on the spot here, but so let's just say the hypothetical is, you know, we've been doing roughly the last couple of years, correct me if I'm wrong, 4.5%-ish around there in terms of an increase. So if we only did a 4.5%, let's say over the next 3 years.
Or we equalized the total amount to that 6% or so per year. 6.3.
Basically, we're going to be short on the reserves. okay, which is gonna impact the bond rating, and we're not gonna have the debt coverage ratio. Give me if you can, a rough sense as to the increase in future bonds. I mean, in other words, what is the negative actual interest?
We could get future bonds for with that lower.
What's going to be the impact? Are we losing? Is it only a quarter of a point? Or are we losing a half a point? And when you look at the total bond amounts, what is that? I'm just trying to get us to
yeah, I know
the impact.
it's kind of one of those things that when you issue debt, when you don't have the cash in reserves to fund it. If you try to do the capital with what you have in cash, then drive it below the minimum, needing to increase rates. But if you issue debt, it's going to increase your debt service payments and subsequently drive your debt coverage ratio lower. So what we're trying to do is balance those two together. I think that's your question, I hope. I'm not positive though.
Try to reword his question. If we maintained a 4.5% increase every year going forward, and because of that, we fell below our cash reserves and also our debt coverage ratio, would that cost us 1% in borrowing, 2%, 5%, 20%? What is the cost to us if we did that?
Yeah, I could not tell you. You know,
really have to go.
obviously, yeah, that'd be a difficult thing
But
to state.
Mr. Goodall has quite a bit of experience in that, and you're welcome to give your opinion on that.
Well, if you read the pictures,
You have to be loud so we can hear you.
Yeah,
it says you basically have a monopoly. You have a board that's willing to raise rates high enough to cover that number. Therefore, you're rated at a double A minus, right? 85. Oh, fine. Plus now? You've been A plus for 2 years.
No, we were just,
I
thought we were downgraded, sorry.
If you go to the corporate line, you go buy a corporate bond.
Yeah.
The difference between like a double A and maybe a B might be a couple percentage points. It's not double, but I'm concerned, and I can't speak to this, just whether they'd even give you.
Gotcha. So the risk is that, to Kevin's question, the risk may not be in a 1% or 2% so much as we literally might not qualify for a future fundraise.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Just consider that at the end of this, you're going to be out about $100 million.
Sure.
Okay. Your operating income is about $4 million. So just to replace, just to kind of keep things running, you're going to have to spend $4 million in your capital. You're going to have to spend $9 or $10 million on interest. Okay. So you've got something like 25 years before you're going to get to the one where you can actually cover some of it.
That makes sense. Thanks for the question, Kevin.
Is that reasonable?
just to clarify, I found the Fitch rating from December 2024. And before they re-rated us in December, we were A plus, not double A plus rating stable. But in December, they rated us A plus rating outlook negative. So we're still A plus, we're not double A, we're A plus. This is Fitch, right? They have different rating systems for different agencies.
If you were to go to something like online, you look at bonds, look at bonds, and you look at the different ratings, it's not. The biggest risk is you may not.
Right.
Is that what I'm new to that question. When it's rated, is that what the outlook negative means? Is we're rating it this way, but going forward, we don't expect it to stay here. We expect it to go down because of everything that they know and okay. Gotcha.
When they go there,
Yeah.
like, that says, wow, Wasatch is really under suffer from all of this growth. Fitch reads it and says, oh, now we're on the.
Got it.
You're gonna, don't blame Grace.
Yeah. So can I ask her, that might be an obvious question to the rest of the board members, but are the actions we're taking now, looking at a rate study, talking about rate increases in a way that will cover cash reserves and cover debt ratios, is that the type of thing that Fitch will look at and say, oh, they're taking the appropriate steps to raise a rating? Is that the kind of actions they're looking for?
The fact that you guys had a rate underway when we did this rating review is what kept us that drop. They can't ignore the fact that we dropped forward. And so the fact that we dropped down there and our costs, our capital program are more higher rate, they had to factor in that, and that's where we have to meet out. The fact that we take these elements.
Got it. Thank you.
Board, is there any other questions for Mark before we open it up to public comment?
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Colby, can you tell me how many people are online, please?
Currently 12 public.
Okay, everybody that's online, you will get a chance to comment, but I'm first going to open it up to the people that are in the room. So everyone, I'd appreciate it if you take 3 minutes max and tell us your name, and we can just go all the way around the room if you'd like. And I'll just start right here with this gentleman. And sorry, you, wait a minute, let me start right here.
No,
Okay.
I'll wait.
Okay, well, you're welcome
maybe
to
come
come
back.
in later.
Yeah.
I don't need to speak.
Okay, go ahead then, sir.
John Wodowski and questions. I've got a couple of questions. So,
Oh, Mark, can you hear him okay?
can I talk louder?
I can move this thing around.
Yeah, I can hear him. I can hear him. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's John
Yeah,
Wodowski.
okay.
I've got two questions. First one, over the last couple of years, have we been able to build any new gas-fired generator plants? And second, have we got one coming up to cover all our needs of this valley where it's growing so fast?
If you don't mind, Mark, I'll let Jason answer that one. Jason, do you mind answering that one?
We've got, we continue to add capacity at the peaking facility that we really power on. We added a little bit more capacity, this last year in 24. And then we, recently done a couple of power sales contracts with UAMP, the Joint Action Agency.
What does that mean?
So that means that a bunch of cities like us, Murray, Hayesville, a bunch of cities within that Joint Action Agency are committed to building a plant down by Fillmore.
Okay.
And a natural gas plant down in the Millard County area. And we're also still working on building a combined cycle plant up in the Pocatello, Idaho area. So we are trying to bring on more natural gas generation as well.
Is there any plans to build one around this valley to really take care of this valley?
Yeah, in one of those debt issuances that you see would be to replace and add additional capacity. We have a natural gas plant now that is being retired due to age. And so in one of those bondings would be to replace that natural gas with additional natural gas capacity here on system.
Okay, and I know prices change and everything else, but approximately, just a roundabout figure, what does it cost to put in one of these generators, these single generators that you normally put in to add in? And of course, I'm sure there's different sizes, and you can add on two, smaller ones or add on two. What is a rough idea of what it costs for one of these generators and to get it in operation, just roughly?
You know, for just a single generator, with the, you know, all the ancillary services and everything that go along with it. You know, you're looking at, you know, several $1 million investment, you know, somewhere north of, you know, 8-12 million per generator.
Right? And then how much does that put out with something like that?
Oh, that would be, you know, that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know, a 3 to 5 megawatt unit.
Which takes care of rough, and I know this is rough, but how many households?
We're a 55 megawatt peaking utility, so, you know, we currently have 16 megawatts of natural gas generation installed on system. And so, you know, we try to keep that percentage where it needs to be for that peaking. That's become even more critical since we've been bringing more solar power purchase agreements online, because really the only thing out there that people are building are solar farms. And so as we're growing, we're going out there and buying what we can buy, and that is solar, but that makes that peaking energy, that stuff that you can bring on when that solar day ends, very critical.
I know what you mean. I got 34 panels, so it's like, it doesn't even begin to take care of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Would anybody, who wants to go next? Go ahead.
My name is Jonathan Clay, Midway. I appreciate the tough job that you guys have and the great service that the Heber Light and Power provides.
Thank you.
I have several questions. Maybe I'll just start with one. If we go around, I can ask some more. It looked like some of the numbers that were provided, there's a lot of conservatism built into the numbers. The capital projections seem to be based on worst case scenarios. The impact fee revenues seem to be quite conservative. The 3 million, Mary, you brought into question whether the 3 million was right or that could be higher. The debt coverage ratio, if I heard it right, the consultant is recommending 1.4, but the bond only requires 1.2. So it seems like there's a lot of conservative built into these numbers. Is there room to trim some of that conservative out of these numbers and lower the rates? And if not, how do we react when the actual costs maybe don't meet those conservative estimates? How do you react to we drop the rates? Exactly, Mike.
Kind of the extreme nature of either really high on one and then really high on the other, and can we bring that down, as Mr. Goodall's saying?
Or if you build
Cut it
in a
down.
little bit of fluff into every single number, then suddenly all that fluff adds up and it's a huge number.
Okay, Mark, did you want to try to answer that? Or should we just continue?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, good, good. Hold on. I think I'm on. Hold on.
How much
There.
fluff have we got?
I'm sorry. I do want to answer that.
Okay, all right, we'll continue. I'm sure we'll have more discussion. All right, Jay, your turn. Let's hear from you.
Okay, and mine's more directed towards the
And
board.
your full name, please.
Jake Rice.
Thank you.
And I've sat here and I appreciate your work and your conservatism and everything that you do. But my question is more probably of a selfish question industry-wide. At the present time, Heber Light Power is building a building over here next to the other one. And I'm in the lumber business, as well as two others in the valley. And we contribute somewhere, I think, or we collect somewhere between $2 and $4 million in sales tax, which portion goes to municipalities, in this case, Heber City. I am wondering why the lumber on that building came from Ogden without even an opportunity for any of the 3 lumber yards in this valley to even give a bid. And I understand you have a contractor, but I think you have the opportunity to request that at least the businesses here, I would hope that you would support the businesses that are here. We use your utilities. We try to be good citizens. I think we contribute quite a bit. We understand the growth, believe me, and it's huge. But why wouldn't we even get, I'm talking about either one of the three, only two of us have accounts with that contractor, but no one got contacted.
I am sorry to hear that. That's not a detail that we focused on. We focused on the regular bid and the references and the timeline.
But when you put a bid in, couldn't you require them
Yes.
to come
Yes.
to our local
At least give a
businesses
local
or
option,
include them?
yeah.
Yes, that you should at
I think
least
that'd
be able to
I
put
think
in the
that would
bid.
be something in
Right.
the future for sure.
Cool. Probably a good thing for us to
We
learn.
actually do business with other municipality school districts. And if we're not 10 to 15% lower on our estimate, we're not considered from their local people. I mean, that's our company alone. But anyway, I appreciate your conservatism and that, but I think there was an opportunity there to maybe put some more money back into Heber City's coffers.
I agree. Hey, Adam, he's our attorney here. Adam,
Yes.
next time we have a contract of this nature, can we please put in that local bid requirement?
Yep, we certainly can.
Okay, please don't forget that, okay? We really want that to be in there. We want our local businesses to have an equal playing field. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. All right, and who's next? Who would like to? Not you, all right.
My question is very simple.
And your name?
Small. Christy Miles.
Thank you, Christy.
So, my husband and I are getting ready to retire, so we're hitting that fixed income stage, so we're trying to plan ahead. So we've been, and this is my fault for not being more proactive and doing my homework, but I was hoping to hear a little bit more about time of use and maybe stats on, my husband actually sent me, because he's like, we put this effort into this, what's the payoff? If we keep track, we're trying to, and I'm wondering if there's any stats on that.
We do have that, and I'm going to refer you, Jared. Jared, I'm going to refer Christy to you because he has that kind of information and he gives it out to all the customers, and you can see how we're trying to move towards that. So you do have the incentive to use your electricity in that morning time or weekend
Have
time.
an individual session to look at your individual circumstances. Correct, Jared? Absolutely.
So I need to contact Aaron.
I was going to say, Jared, will you please talk to her after this and he'll get you that information. Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead. We skipped you. Go ahead. Are you done, Christy?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Bronson, and I just, on the fixed income, this is something, we've got people that live on fixed income. And they just barely have the lights on and up, Is there a rate? Some people are lit up like Clark Griswold, I mean, you can see them from all over the valley. Could there be a different rate for those that are using? And
You'll see it. You'll see it. Let's show that slide again. Colby, if you'll take that down. Mark, if you'll go back to that slide on the residential block rate versus the higher block rate, I think you'll see. And
a lot of people are just, like I say, on a fixed income, and then it's.
Julian, you can share it.
If we're all on the same.
We charge the lower rate. Yeah, we have a lower rate. Thank you. We have the lower rate for up to a certain amount, and we really are using that to target our fixed income users, that you're not Clark Griswold, you're not the mega mansion. You see what I mean? Right. And we have the lower rate for that initial block. And we want to show that to you. If Jillian or Mark, you can pull up that lower rate on residential, the 1,000 kilowatts and below versus above that, please. I thought that was the number. That demand rate.
Slide number 19, I believe.
There we go. Can you see?
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Okay, good. I'm sorry.
The block 1 and the block 2. That block 1 is definitely trying to help our fixed income people, But when they go, when you go above that 1,000 kilowatts, then there's that
I
higher rate.
appreciate that. That's just my question, if we could, make it,
And
make
we'll,
it a little easier on the.
exactly,
It's also double. Like, what do we call
the 400 amp and above,
it? This way.
right, for the,
Yeah.
the mega, the bigger homes.
Basic rate.
If you're on a well, you have to go for.
Yeah. That would be the residential pumping, right? Which is now going to be that lower rate, not a separate rate. And then you can do the time of use again at more and more in the future to save more money.
As it bumps up, keeps it there for
Keeps
household
it there.
use.
Well,
I just wanted to say too, that I appreciate this is the first time I've ever been to a Heber Light and Power Board meeting, and, but I know all you guys, most of you, and I appreciate all that you
we're all
do.
neighbors.
Exactly.
We are, and we're all going to be paying for this too.
didn't
All
know
of
we had
us.
much-
That's right.
Didn't know we had so much fun in
We don't have this funny people.
No, this
City
is great.
council meetings,
We're glad
unless
to hear.
something
It's a great
comes out.
turnout,
We're
and
glad to
we
hear.
really appreciate your time. All right, so we're gonna continue. Is there anybody around that corner though, on this side that wants, okay, so you're next then, go ahead.
I guess a follow-up to that, with regarding the peak rate, for households that have dual income earners or single parent households that work 8 to 5, come home to do their routine,
Right.
at the peak hours, is there any consideration or program for that?
We really have discussed that, Jody, and I wish we had a better answer, but we don't. And it's because of this duck curve that Mr. Goodall referred to, and it shows how we have the duck tail in the morning, and then it kind of goes down through the day, and then we peak up, right? In that late afternoon, evening, until everybody goes to bed. And then that's the head of the duck. Does that sort of make sense? Duck tail, body, head of the duck. So because of that customer demand, that's where the peak rate has been drawn. And it is a national standard to my knowledge. Bill, would you like to help?
I don't know what prices you have, but we, for example, set our washing machine and our dishwasher on pause so that it won't go on before 10 o'clock at night. So we pay 7 cents a kilowatt hour to wash dishes rather than 12 or
10 or 11, yeah.
Can I have Jason talk about peak times that, we start hitting our peak and what implications that is to us and how much we have to pay for power?
Yeah, for a per peak period, Bill mentioned it, or Mark mentioned it in his presentation. The majority of the hours when we start making the adjustment to time of use rates, like your whole weekend period, any type of holidays or off peak, and through the day, power costs can go up as much as on a hot summer day through that peak period. You can see power prices go from $20 per megawatt hour, 2 cents a kilowatt hour, off peak, to as high as 70 cents a kilowatt hour on peak. And so the more that we can really, incent customers to, lower their demand through those high demand hours, then we're not going out to the market and trying to buy that last incremental peak piece of energy, which is very, very costly. And, we're here to help too. We have, rebate programs that, we don't even get that much traction on, but we will help with rebates, upgrade that washer so that it can be programmed, or upgrade that dryer so it can be programmed. Rebate programs to get that Nest thermostat that can be programmed in the home, so that, and we have people that will go in the home and help even program it. and do energy analysis. So we do have that energy efficiency program that we are here to help, and we would really like to get our customers to move off of those peak demand times.
Regarding the net metering program, on solar, where the circuits are full, any consideration about opening up additional capacity for solar by that?
Yes, you know, we just opened up a couple more circuits that were saturated. And, you know, we're working diligently through our capital plan to open up more circuits that are locked up. We're also reviewing that policy this year, you know, to go to the latest engineering as far as, you know, that analysis as to how much our circuits can actually handle. And we're hoping that will free up another 20 to 30%. We're not trying to stop the net metering. You know, we have, you know, probably the most progressive net metering program in the whole state of Utah. And that's not what we're trying to do. It's just, we are so popular that, you know, we don't want the system to collapse because of all that generation on the system. So.
If that doesn't answer your question, you know, please continue to email us and ask us more questions. All of you are welcome to do that. We know we've got to meet the future, right? And the future is hopefully more sustainable renewables that can not just be when the sun's shining, right? Anyway, so, you know, keep going. Go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, my name is Jamie. First of all, I have a question about what determines a small commercial, medium commercial, and a large commercial.
So Mark, do you want to answer that, or do you want Jason to, on what's a small, medium, or large commercial rate or class?
What makes them? What determines the small?
Yeah, what determines the small, medium, or large commercial rate or usage?
I think it might be best if, yeah.
We will. Okay, go ahead, Jared.
Yeah.
And Jared, introduce your
Yeah, so I'm
position.
Jared Wright, I am the one that runs all the programs Jason just talked about. So, for small commercial, it's determined by demand. So up to 30 kW is small. Anything between 30 kW and 250 kW is, and that's kilowatts, is the medium, and anything over 250 is the large.
Okay, so could you give an example?
So the majority of our commercial is in the small. Medium would be something like a lot of the school, the elementaries and stuff, or kind of the bigger part of the medium. Lower part would be like a convenience store type of a thing. All of the large customers are like the high school and Sticker Parsons that have these huge machinery.
Big grocery store.
Yeah, some of the, yeah.
Okay, well, that just concerns me because we're having the going from 0.05 to 0.065. So those people are going to pass that directly onto us. So if they're paying more to refrigerate our food and freeze our food, then we're automatically paying more for groceries. The same with our school. Like the school's paying more for their power, we're paying more. We're paying more for that. That's just one reason. My power bill is $700 a month. Granted, my husband has a rock collecting shop on some Charleston. So the 13% that they just stated is averaging $13 a month. I think that's a little off. That's just me. My power bill is going to go up at least $100. So somebody stated that it was basically because of growth, and then people are acting as if we have no control over the growth. Wasatch County has general plan. Sorensen approved 5,700 units in 2020. North Village and Harvard Village at over 800 units was annexed in December 2024. Sitla's 4,220 acres was recently given the green light to expand our annexation map to the planning commission. Today you voted for the North Village and you're also on the power board. Envision Central adds 4-story density downtown and is planning soon to redevelop our historic core. Wasatch County, Kendall is reworking his plan to add more density. They're reworking their general plan to add more density.
Where, well, we don't need to argue it here, but
No, we don't need to argue. I listened to the meeting. They said we're updating our general plan.
not necessarily to add more density.
What do you think they're updating it for? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, there's been no feasibility study. We don't know how much it's going to cost for power. Nobody's doing a feasibility study for any of this. Nobody did a feasibility study before it was approved, before Harvard Village was approved. So how can we sustain this? I thought we were coming tonight to talk about the budget. That's not the case. We have some slides that so on the 2025 budget, it listed 3% rate increase, but now you're proposing a 13% increase with $15 million in bonds. I don't know the actual cost. We went through the bonds a little bit. I know they're super, super expensive. I'm not sure why we're not spending within our means. Heber Power is proposing, or not proposing, sorry, they're building, as this gentleman stated, not using our local. Sorry. Okay, so anyway, phase 2 is $750,000 for the campus modification. I don't know what that is.
That's to rework the buildings that are over out by the Public Works.
Okay, I thought it was.
And there's a building that's going to be torn down that's not inhabitable, so to speak, or usable. And then the others would be upgraded for our inventory needs and security needs and so forth in conjunction with what's being moved to the new building. So that's the phase 2 of the campus. Okay.
So my question is, why expand that was not, sorry, page 13 on the budget, there's $3 million in miscellaneous. That seems like a lot of money. So my question, why expand the Silver map when Sorensen's is already too much? We talked about independence. Why wouldn't we just say independence, go get your own power? Like, why would we provide power to independence when we're already maxed out? None of these impact fees are going to pay off because we have to redo everything in 20 years. So why push downtown density when we've already, when the Harvest Village is this fresh? Why build a $17 million office when the rates are 13%? Why rework the county plan when we're maxed out? I want the donors to pay for this, not me. We got no feasibility study, no clear answers. Did Ostergaard tag votes for higher density and to increase our power rate? And Kendall Crittenden also voting for higher density and rate increases, and you showed them conflict of interest, and then there's a $3 million mystery.
Okay, so Jamie, why don't we have you sit down with Bart? Where's Bart? There you are. Bart's this our CFO, and he's going to be able to help you with that $3 million. To me, that seems high, and I'd have to go dive back into miscellaneous. I don't recall a miscellaneous category like that, but I'd love to learn about that. Okay. And yeah, and just to clarify that, this was quite a glitch that happened at the state transparency website this week, where suddenly out of the blue, they doubled everyone's salaries and benefits and posted it on the website to say that was what we were actually paying, and we're not. Just
that happened.
Yes, yes. It happened last week.
It happened in 2022.
No.
You want to explain that?
So on January 26, 2023, I submitted our annual transparency for the
Are we doing that?
January 26, 2023.
On May 4th, 2024, the state contacted me and said they had a problem with their system, so they needed me to repost 2022 salary. So I reposted it. They had told me that they deleted the old file, but they didn't, so it was doubled up for just 2022. 2023, 2024, 21, 20, they were all accurate, but
Mark, is that why 2020, 2021, 2022 went up a lot and then 2023 came back down?
double because the report was in there.
That's why it looks so weird.
Why is it adding up all those years together?
It was that 1 year it doubled. Added 2 files.
But then why is she seeing stuff from 2022 twice when we're in 2025? Okay, so you noticed that it was from 2022 back then?
22 people fired back from 200,000 to 400,000.
Okay, but it was only 2022. It wasn't 2023 and 2024. Okay.
Were you assuming we gave that individual a $2,000?
$200,000
pay cut?
I wasn't assuming anything, I was just going over what I thought.
Right,
But
okay.
you put out the worst case scenario.
See, the way it was explained to us previously is we thought it was this current year, not 2022. So I'm glad that's cleared
No, I
up.
knew what it was.
Thank you very much.
I'm just wondering how we're supposed to, compare with other people's salaries, the salaries in Heber, if we're getting false information and nobody has changed it, gone onto it, gotten anything taken care of. So I can't say, oh, is this normal or is this not normal when somebody has a $400,000 salary? That's the information that I'm giving. So don't say I put out there because it's you who's putting it out there, it's Bart who's putting it out there. Don't tell me that I put that out there.
We understand. We understand.
Information from, they don't make it up.
We understand. We understand.
It looks like it's fixed now.
Yeah, we are very glad.
The transparency.utah site looks like
Grace, I
it's
don't
correct.
think you want to ask a question. You're good. Mr. Goodall, you're good? All right, I'm going to come around to this side of the room. Would any of you like to-
I've got a customer that called for 2 years, so I just.
We'll wait on that. We'll wait on that. We'll see if Mr. Church, is that right? Would like to make a comment.
Sure, I've been before this board many times. Maybe Jared can help the best with it. I represent the airport and the hangars, and so we fall into the general service small category, and we get nailed with demand every time. I mean, this is my last bill. I paid $6.55 for electricity, not too bad. Demand was 4 times that. So, yeah, it was over, $24 for demand. So what we had talked about in the past was use of service, which really helps the customer to become more responsive. And I think that's, great for the Heber Electric. And we had talked about doing the use of service policy for the general service category. And we haven't looked at it, and I just would like to know why we haven't looked at it other than residential, because it would really help.
We've certainly heard this about the airport for some time. I would hate for you to see the demand charge that the Delta Stone to the south of you has to pay. It is incredible. I don't even want to guess, but when they have to turn on their machines and when you're opening that door.
With us, we raised the hangar door. So what's happening is people are disconnecting the hangar doors and running them off a generator.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it's not 1 or 2, a lot of people are. And because of that demand, I even went to the door manufacturers to put a soft start on the motor, and then you can't. And that's
really
one way of addressing demand. But it's just, I'm trying to offer a solution of, the use of service. And have we looked into that? And basically, why haven't we? Because we've talked about it in the past.
Jason, do you recall what we talked about on that? I don't recall, sorry.
Several years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and that's proposal from Mark, we're moving all of the pumping onto a tiny use.
This is airport doors, hangar doors.
Jim would fall into the small general service category. And under this proposal, that wouldn't happen in year 1, but small general service would go into a time of use. In looking at this, after talking to Jim on the phone, I think that we would have to really look at year 2 and 3 of this rate proposal and make sure that we analyze moving the demand to tiny use as well as the energy, because right now it's the energy charge that's being moved into tiny use and not that demand charge that's really affecting the accounts like the airport hangars. So that'd take a little bit of further analysis as far as year 2 and 3 when we're moving everyone into that tiny use type category.
Can I ask Mr. Beauchamps a question on that, Mark? Is it a trend for time of use to be used in the demand charges, not just the energy use charge? Or Jillian, do you know?
Oh, can you hear
I
me?
haven't, oh, there you are, Mark.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
What it is, it's a little bit different in what we do when we move to time use fully is the demand charge that really impacts the hangars. We bring that to be only reflective of the distribution demand related cost because we have to size the facilities to handle that peak demand. But all the other costs related to power supply and transmission is rolled into the energy component of the on-peak. So we don't put the demand on time of use. We just charge a distribution demand. Everything else goes into energy, the on-peak energy. And I think what I'm saying is that if we were to do that, I'm assuming the hangar's extremely low load factor, so it's called, that their bills would probably come down.
Well, I guess that's something we're definitely going to have to look at, but I had never heard, sorry, the demand charge being time of use, just the energy charge. So that's why I was asking.
Well, there are some that will do that. It's I would say maybe 20% of the time use rates for large industrial will have an on-peak demand charge, but most of them avoid that. There's a reason from a cost of service basis why you don't want to have an on-peak demand charge that recovers power supply and transmission and to roll it in the energy. It's a little complicated to explain it, but.
We will probably come back and explain that again, but did you have any other questions, Mr. Sherman?
Could look into and, it's the same thing.
Not with this year.
Yeah, so what Mark's saying is we take a component of what your demand charge is right now and shift that into the energy charge, which you just said, your energy charge would go up a little bit, but you're not using that much energy. Your demand charge would go down because some of the fixed costs associated with that demand would move into the time of use energy rate.
Appreciate it if you'd look into it, that'd be great.
That's probably not for this year, right, Jason?
Could be in year 2 or 3 when we're shifting to the time of use rate.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here? Anyone else back there? Okay, we're going to. And what? Okay, you had asked about how do we cut out the fluff?
Yeah, maybe fluff was the wrong term, but it just seemed like there were scenario assumptions in both the cost side and maybe some of the revenue. And if
that
reality doesn't prove to be that worst case scenario, how do we adjust?
Okay, I'm going to give a quick answer, Mark. You go ahead then.
That's actually a great question. And I want to, first of all, tell you that we don't use budgets. We use projections to take out the fluff in the expense side of it. Now, with that said, we feel we're close on the expense side, but with the capital improvements and the revenue associated with impact fees, that we were conservative with, and that's the only piece of it. And the reason is because if we miss those impact fees, it's gonna cause our debt coverage to drop And I mentioned earlier that the bond covenant is 1.2, we target a minimum 1.4. And that's not being conservative, that's being practical, because if we targeted a 1.2, because of the variability in sales and bad things happening, above 50% of the time we violate our bond covenant. So, and as I mentioned earlier, if we did that, we'd be in violation of our technical default on our debt. So, but I want to give you assurance, other than the impact fee related stuff, the other parts are not conservative.
Yeah, and
They're
I appreciate
projections.
that. I'm not complaining about the projections. I'm just wondering if reality doesn't match projections,
Right.
then we need to adjust. How do we do that?
And we will.
Correct.
We
Yeah.
will, because what Mr. Goodall was saying up front, try to delay capital needs being built, which delays borrowing. You see what I mean? Which delays raising future rates to have to pay for that borrowing. We have pushed really hard the last 3 years to make sure we did have a complete capital facilities plan for any eventual growth that we saw coming out there. And it's at different points, right? Some things go fast, some things wait for way too long, but that's fine. We don't want the traffic either.
I think we have another, the same conversation that Mark and I have had over the past 2 or 3 rate increases.
Yes.
And, you know, if that's what you want, then you need to come to the meeting and say, don't approve new buildings, don't approve new substations.
Well, that's to the
don't
cities
approve-
and the counties, yes.
And don't approve new growth. But what happens here, this is the part, and we got into this detail tonight, but because of the inflation that's happened over the past 2 years, and because of the inflation in building costs, they've got themselves in a little bit of a hole relative to debt coverage. And, you know, all of that cash, I keep saying, stop borrowing so quickly, wait, and save yourself some money. You heard me say it again today. That's one way that they can help themselves, but that 13%, I tried every way I could think of, stock market, using that out in the future, but the problem is if you don't do it, they got a debt coverage problem next year. And so once you get through next year, we're gonna have this discussion again anyway, and that's when it gets adjusted. Is that a reasonable answer?
So Kevin?
I think, to kind of piggyback on that, if I understood it correctly, is, and please correct me if I'm wrong. If in fact the board was to approve what's being proposed, the 13% that incorporated this first year, whatever the study shows, we're projecting 3.5 in year 2 and year 3, that those can always be adjusted. So I think in your example, if I understood correctly, if we're projecting 3 million in impact fees, but we collect 5, that's going to go right into that calculation next year, and maybe those 3.5s turn into 1.5, or whatever it is.
So you're saying on an annual basis, at least you're looking at those numbers and making those
Yes.
adjustments.
Yes.
I don't see this as a commitment for those rates.
We look at them every year.
We look at them every year. So the main one is, yes, that's kind of what we're projecting for 1, 2, and 3. But come next year, we're going to look at it, and you know, if that 3.5% that was recommended now, if that's the right number based on more actuals. That's how I look at it.
It's more complicated than we can ever explain in just a few minutes too. I am sorry. I hope you don't mind. You had a turn. I'm going to have to let some people online that are here to have a turn too. So Colby, could you set up the participation list so we can see who's online, and then anybody that's online that would like to give a comment, your turn is, you mean we don't have any public comment?
5 is what I said.
5. Could you please pull up that list, because can they raise their hand? Thank you, Mr. Church. Okay, so I'm sorry, the list just kind of disappeared there. There we go. So we have Addie, Jeremy, MJ and Thomas, if any of you would like to talk, could you please raise your hand? It's a little icon, I think, at the bottom of the screen that you can click on, and then we'll call on you and you can come off mute and we'll let you have your say. Anyone online that wants to give a comment, please. Can you explain better how to raise your hand?
If you're using the app, if you're on Zoom itself, if you just click on the screen, you'll have an option to raise your hand. It's literally an icon that says raise your hand, or maybe you choose to speak. Different iOS model might show something different, but I don't show any activity at all.
Well, you're still welcome to raise your hands all. We have 2 comments, one in a phone call and one in a letter that I need to read into the record. So Bart, do you want to explain about the phone call that you received and who that was from and what they said, please?
Yes, I received a call today from Bob Turner, who is one of our residents.
Thank you.
He has a background in finance. He mentioned that with the growth of 300 to 600 new customers a year, the financial side of this doesn't make sense that we even need a rate increase because of the growth in our. That's all I want to say.
Okay, so Mark, do you want to help address that question? That is a good question. If we're growing to the degree we are, the percentage we are, then why do we need a rate increase with our growth?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, the reason is if you look in our modeling, that growth that we're projecting, we're accounting for the revenue attributed to that growth. Without that growth, the financials won't look as good. So the growth is accounted for within the modeling. So even with the growth, it's still not offsetting all the changes in cost.
So there's the short and sadness, not short and sweet, but short and sadness. The growth is not offsetting other costs that are coming with the growth, even with the impact fees. And I've sadly seen that in city government. Bill, did you want to really quickly?
What happens here is the investment that either Light and Power has to make is way ahead of the eventual income that they get from the growth. And as that growth occurs, their operating costs go up. So as we said before, the incremental contribution of growth is a very small percentage relative to everything else. So in order to fund the bonds, we have to have it now to build the infrastructure for that group that's going to be out there sometime. They've got to have some money.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Here's the statement from James McCleary in Daniel, as well as Mike and Mary Duggan, Kim and Barb Norris, Scott and Dana Keel, Tim Clark, Bill and Pam Skinner, and Lee and Tori Skinner. And they've dated this February 17th, 2025, and they say, Board of Directors, be aware, I and we and Daniels adamantly oppose your presentation of rate increases and rate implementation to support new development, exclamation point. New developments need to bear the burden of, quote, their development, period. We are not, quote, their piggy bank, unquote. And that's all of that letter. Okay, is there anyone else online that would like to give a comment? Feel free to come off mute. Are you allowing, allowing the chat?
Oh, I was going to say we could do chat. That's another
Let's
option.
allow the chat
It's
to
open
make
already.
sure.
You can chat.
Everyone, the chat is open. If you can open up the chat and you're not able to raise your hand, please tell us in the chat so we can call on you. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to unmute everyone online. So you're welcome to just begin talking, but please tell us who you are. So you're unmuted right now. If you want to give a comment, please go ahead.
They can mute themselves again if they don't want to. is what's
Right,
happening
right.
now.
So, all right.
So I'm going to put everyone talking.
All right, so you're on, they've just muted themselves?
I am muted, so they can mute or unmute themselves. I've asked them also to unmute if they want to talk. They can do it if
Okay.
they want. No one should be.
So if you're choosing to unmute, then you can give a comment. Here's your final chance to give a comment for the public comment period, please. Just come off mute and tell us your name. Going once. Twice. All right, thank you very much for attending. We do appreciate your time. We're going to take one more comment from John. Go ahead.
I'll go to Alfie from Daniel. So the cash on hand, is that earning any interest, or are we losing it by inflation?
I don't think no one's earning interest to keep up with inflation, and no, we are not either. But we are earning interest on it. And that is in our monthly financial statements. It's probably let me guess, I'm trying to guess, it's probably about the 10th page down, where we have all of our cash explained and where it's at and so forth and what we're earning in interest. It's also lower in the financial statements that are in the same format as our yearly audit. So you can go from the financial statements right to the audit, and they match up month to month and year to year.
With the way things are.
It is page 9.
Thank you.
I wonder if it'd be a good idea to take 10%, put it in outright gold.
I don't know if the state law allows us to invest in gold. We're not going to do cryptocurrency, that's for sure.
No.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope we've covered everyone's questions. It really means a lot to us that you come. It means a lot to us that we can try to answer your questions the best we can while you're here, and that you can, feel better at least with what you're concerned about. We really appreciate your time, Mr. Goodall. We appreciate your time, Christy, and everyone else who's come. Or do you have any further comments? Well, I'll close the public hearing. Sorry, I'm closing the public hearing, but board, do you now have further comments or questions for Mark? No. Go ahead.
I do, and I want to say this in the most respectful manner here. Because I know it is what it is. That a big part of in a growing community, a big part of these expenses, the capital improvements that are required, that aren't fully covered by impact fees. That's a complete separate issue, because that's the state that kind of ties our hands from not being able to cover all of the capital improvements. Is that yes, all of our communities are growing, but let's face it, we have Heber City growing disproportionately, I think, in compared to other communities. And I hear it from constituents, because I represent Midway that are concerned about that. It's one thing for someone to support a rate increase to kind of cover the growth of their community, but it's another one to feel that that they're subsidizing another community.
That was as tactful as I think you could be.
Jason, in a future meeting, it's not going to sway the decision tonight, but in a future meeting, is it possible to get an idea of what kind of units what kind of unit costs are coming from the northern annexation, the eastern side of the county, Christensen Farms, and all of that stuff out of the east, the Daniels growth? Because Kevin, I grew up in Midway. I know you're relatively recent, not so recently. You're a California moving, but I used to ride.
No, we don't do
Hey,
that
I moved
here.
from Southern California too, so I can say it. But I used to ride my motorcycle with no fences in the way through what is now Valet, and through Interlochen, and through Watts developments, and through where you live actually too. I used to, down there by Price Farms and stuff. So the reality is that all grew out at a different time. And I actually am curious to see, because I see a lot of growth out in the eastern side, and I see growth down south, and I see, new commercial stuff coming online. I'd be curious to know, and I think the public might be curious to know, where is the growth actually coming from? Because that percentage that was up on the screen, and I don't know if Kobe can bring it up fast enough, the percent that was actually new growth was a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be. The inflation and the debt ratio and the is higher than
Power
I,
purchases that
before I
we
was
had
in
to
the
make.
seat a year ago. Yeah, there were exactly
Never
before.
even realized.
A year ago, I'd have been saying, you're growing so much, but now I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot more to it than just the growth. But I think it'd be interesting, Kevin, to your point, and to your constituents to say, well, where is that growth coming from? Because the reality is, years ago, somebody had to pay for infrastructure for Belay. Years ago, somebody had to pay for the homestead. You know, it's not this year, but it did happen, right? And so it'd be interesting to know where that's coming from now. And I think it might help Daniel folks that wrote in understand a little bit more. It might help Midway folks understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
It will help
That would
Heber
help.
and to understand how much growth is happening just outside Heber boundaries too, you know. Heber stops at Mill Road, and it's a lot of stuff past Mill Road.
And I know it's gonna vary from community to
Um,
community.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
well-
second line.
It was that one, yeah, exactly. Just the percent growth of the actual people here is lower than I thought it was, actually, which is interesting.
But
I just think it might help you answer
Sure,
questions
sure.
to your constituents in the future.
two things. I think Mark or anyone else could feel free to correct me on this. So there's customer growth, which is one component. But there's also the capital improvement needs
Infrastructure,
based
yeah.
upon infrastructure. And those two aren't necessarily
No, they're not.
Right.
exactly lined
They're
up.
not.
They're
right?
delayed, right? The
They're-
timeline's
they're-
delayed.
They're
Yeah.
delayed.
Yep.
And I'm just, yes, I've
Yeah.
been in Midway now, 10 years
system-
now.
The system's integrated too, and so a capital improvement in Heber may definitely bolster a circuit that's feeding it. And so with an integrated system, like the big point of delivery substation that we did, that helped every customer throughout the whole service territory, it gives you capacity for new growth, but it also solidified reliability for everyone, especially on the transmission grid system. So that's where it gets hard to quantify. We can definitely give you, data as far back as our system shows how many meters have been added in Midway versus, Daniel or Heber compared to Wasatch County, or, and we can do those, but, at the end of the day, to us as staff, it's all just customers and it's all just growth, and we don't differentiate between a Midway customer and a Charleston customer or a county customer. It's coming from everywhere in our opinion.
Yeah, and my comment, honestly, Mayor, I'm sorry, my comment is being very sensitive to the fact that the residents ask us to represent them, right? And they say, go and say this thing, right? They say, go and tell Heber to slow down. And I hear that, and I'm part of Heber, right? So I then want to say, well, I wish I had the facts to say what is causing it, and I think to your point, meters by area, that might be a really interesting look for people to go, oh, well, that's different than I thought.
I have townhomes in Heber, one home in Midway, and they take the same home.
That's an interesting take too. That's, it's just interesting. I hear frankly, I'm glad that the residents told you to say, I'm glad that they reach out, because they reach out to us too. I'm just glad to hear it.
You've got a, because it is happening, and I understand in terms of, a larger home versus, 10 townhomes or whatnot. But my experience both on the planning commission and now this, city council in 2 terms have been that the growth that's coming in Midway, at least since I've been here, has been substantially under what the zoning would allow, versus we're seeing, the argument from developers. I'm speaking as a developer, right? My experience is affordable housing. The developers that come in and say, I need, zoning allows for this, give me this density, and I'm going to give you X amount of affordable units that really aren't affordable, which is another discussion that we can have.
Not doing that.
That's gonna be on the housing.
Right.
And they're not doing that anyway.
But they're not-
The legislature took that away from us.
Yeah. Well, can I just show one thing? Colby, if you can pull up that financial trend sheet, if you're done, I just wanted to say, I think,
Go ahead.
I think that the customer growth is going to increase so much more than it has in the past. When you look at the kayak numbers from last year compared to previous years, where the developers are coming in and putting in the wholesale, large scale development abilities. We don't have the homes being built to that extent, but the capacity is going to be there, and it is coming very quickly with kayak. Anyway, it was up to 9 million last year.
The actual increase in kilowatt hours last year was 10%. The amount of wholesale
Yes.
kilowatt hours was 10%.
And that's existing customers as well as new ones that are increasing our usage. But yes, if you can scroll up to the top, tippy top, not the bottom, sorry, tippy top. The financial trend sheet is showing that almost double increase in kayak, which means, and there you go, it's on 16, line 16. 9.4 million up from what, 5.4 the year before? That's our installations to get new developments hooked onto our system. That's huge. That's absolutely huge growth. That's going to, I think, dramatically, again, if the market will bear the new growth that's coming, that 9 million plus is showing you that developers think it will, and they're going to continue to build as much as they can. Now, there you go. We need more personnel. We're going to need more equipment. Over time, we'll need more depreciation and more maintenance too. So anyway.
And the reality is it'll shift too geographically, Kevin, to your point.
Charleston's turn's coming.
As we think about where the
turn's
land
coming.
is left in this valley, right? We'll see more on the east side. We'll see more on the east bench. We'll see more in Daniel. We'll see more, certainly more in Charleston, I would think, especially as some of those big farming areas decide they're done with farming.
And they're annexing into commercial.
I'm super glad to have the visibility in advance as far as we have here. I mean,
Well,
I hate the idea of seeing negative cash reserves like that's like, well, that doesn't work. That actually isn't possible.
We have stopped our payments to the cities that we used to give as dividends because we really need to dig out of this hole. I know it's astounding to see the amount of cash reserves we have, but again, to reiterate, that's mostly from bonding right now, and we're paying interest on those cash reserves, and they are already planned to be spent as this growth continues to come, and kayak is showing that it's coming. We'll see if this is even higher this year. I don't know, but it's, 900,000 plus in 1 month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go
ahead, Kendall.
I was posed a question, and I know we're talking about rate increase, not impact fees, but I had thought of this. Mr. Goodall mentioned that we ought to turn North Philly back to Rocky Mountain, but it relates to that. I know we talked over the years, and I've said it more than once, that Heber City, you're annexing that area, you're ready to take the infrastructure that Rocky Mountain Power put into that area.
Yes.
Those people, when they went into the Rocky Mountain Power area, paid an impact fee to get that.
They paid the cost of whatever infrastructure was
Yeah,
there. Which
in
was
there, and that would have went whatever they charged. But the question was posed, as we annex those areas in that have already been in Rocky Mountain Power service area into Heber Light and Power, can or do we charge them an impact fee to come onto our system?
Yes. Yes, we do.
I didn't know the answer. I didn't know.
Yes.
Of
course
you
we
understand my question?
Yeah.
If we annex an area that's already been on Rocky Mountain now because Heber annexes them, they now come onto our system because that's part of the franchise agreement. Do we charge them an impact fee?
So the vast majority of North Village is brownfield.
Yeah.
Meaning there's no Rocky Mountain Power customers there. So if there is, a lot of when the developers are doing it, like say that Fitzgerald piece, all of the Rocky Mountain Power customers got demolished, and new Heber Line Power customers are going on where those customers were. But there are some that, like let's take haulage that's out there.
They would have been Rocky Mountain Power.
They are currently a Rocky Mountain Power customer. Now, if they come in and are annexed, which they have, then we sit down with that customer and they can choose at that point to stay with Rocky Mountain Power. It's that brown seal that we have to serve under state statute. But with each individual Rocky Mountain Power customer, if they choose not to change their service to Heber Light and Power, then they can stay on their system. There's nothing that forces that, except Rocky Mountain Power could, under that same statute, accuse us of cherry picking, saying, oh, well, you took all this brownfield and they bulldozed over all of our customers, and yet you choose not to take this apartment complex in which we've got 2,500 bad accounts in, so within that, you can't do that either. So, there's that cherry picking clause within that as well, in which, hopefully we can work with Rocky Mountain Power, with those customers that aren't getting demolished and becoming new subdivision, and where they stay, where they go. And, Heber City can work with them too on whether or not they actually, annex in, they can stay county customers for that matter, as part of that as well.
Well, let me make one final statement regarding what Kevin has said about, is it fair to subsidize other parts of the county where there's high growth? To me, there's two factors here. Every time we increase our system capacity and replace or upgrade our system, that's going to allow more people to use solar and be able to become net metering and sell, power back to us and get a credit. Because remember, a lot of our system is older, right? In Old Town, or older in Midway, where the developments happened decades and decades ago, and their capacity is not there. So growth is bringing in the capacity to be able to bring in more solar customers as we're able to, expand our system with growth, wherever that might be. The other is the N1 capacity, which is the redundancy in our system. We haven't had N1 capacity everywhere, especially in old towns and older areas, but with the new growth coming in, that does increase our stability and our ability to recover faster from outages that we hadn't had in those areas. So me, I am not the most pro-growth person, okay? I would rather preserve farmland around here. But yes, okay, but the point is that with wherever that growth is, it is helping the overall system in those two ways, right? More solar capacity, more individual people can get on solar and use electric vehicles or whatever, whereas we're not able to always provide that. I can't get solar right now at my house because of that lack of capacity in older areas. But the N1 capacity redundancy is important too, just to provide more stability for our customers with future outages. Let's keep juggling this ball, right, of growth. I'm so sorry, we're out of public hearing.
I just wanted to make a comment.
I'll let you do it for 15 seconds, please.
I really appreciate you return light. Whenever there's been a problem, an accident or something happened along, we guys get Johnny on the spot, got it dealt with. And if someone was on without power and light, it might be a little different story.
Oh, that's interesting. That's true. We do hear them in the news a lot more, don't we, when it comes to outages? Okay, so board, I'm turning it back to you. You can wait on this decision. You can make a motion on this decision. If you want to ask Mark and Jillian more questions, I guess my only question is can we take the total percentage of rate increases and try to even them out year to year? But I know that would probably take more modeling. I just don't know if you perhaps did that already, Mark or Jillian.
You talked about that, so.
I think we did talk about it.
Mark, are you?
I would imagine.
Yeah, I think
I can answer a little bit. I know because of the coverage ratio, that's really what's driving this immediate need in 2025. So spreading the 13% out
full amount too.
And I spoke to our financial advisor, our underwriter, and they were very concerned over that. Said we need to do whatever we can to get to that coverage ratio. However.
Of course, or we're likely not gonna borrow.
And correct me if I'm wrong, unfortunately, even the 13% doesn't get us
You're
to
right.
the full debt coverage.
This year it won't,
It
but
won't.
the next year it will.
So anything less than the 13 is only gonna make that
Yeah,
twenty
that works.
twenty-five debt coverage ratio worse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Adam. Adam, are you still engaged?
I am.
All right.
Legally, what is our responsibility as a board to make sure that Heber Light and Power remains economically feasible, that we can cover our debt coverage, that we maintain our cash reserves? Meaning, let me say this a different way. If you are my legal counsel, which you are in this case, what is your recommendation to me to do my job as a board member?
I mean, to start with, that's those are decisions above my pay grade. That's why you all decided to run for office. Whatever consolation that might be. You know, your obligation to Heber Power as an entity, as a board member, looks very much the same as your obligation to Heber City as a city council member. You have a variety of interests that you are, for all practical purposes, required to balance. In the Heber Power case, you have rates, you have costs for customers, you have rate structures, you have system type decisions that you as the board are obligated to balance. My legal advice to you would be make decisions in the best interest of Heber Light and Power as an entity. And that obviously takes into account customer concerns, ability to accommodate future growth, things like that. As opposed to, say, making decisions for Heber Light and Power based on what is best for Heber City or Charleston. Your obligation as a board member is to do what's best for Heber Power in your judgment.
Great. That was what I was expecting to hear. And I'm glad you didn't say make decisions based on what is popular or desired by the residents that you've heard from.
Adam, I apologize. I'm gonna ask the question again here from the perspective of, and please feel free to correct me where you think I'm wrong. So I represent Midway, which is a part owner of Heber Light and Power. I'm just one of other, council members selected to represent Midway. I feel I'm representing Midway's interest and ownership in Heber Light and Power, not representing Heber Light and Power globally throughout the county, regardless of its impact upon Midway. That's how I look at my seat on this board. Please correct me where you think I'm wrong on that.
And I think I would. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I guess I'm thinking about it from a financial and risk perspective. You might be addressing it from a different perspective, Adam. So why don't you go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, so Kevin, I think I'm going to disagree with you on that position. Obviously, each of the board members has their own perspective based on, what part of the valley they're from, what city they represent, in an elected official capacity. And I can find language and send it to you. I think either our bylaws or our organization agreement makes pretty clear that the Heber Power Board is acting on behalf of Heber Power as an entity. And if I were to do a slightly different hypothetical, if the Heber Power Board members were acting only in the best interest of their city, Heber City wins all of those and the other cities lose all of those, because Heber City at the end of the day has 75% of the voting authority on our board.
Mark, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I'm afraid I may be taking the question out of context, because I read it more from the standpoint of Midway versus Heber City and the growth being in Heber City right now. And Midway customers are helping to fund some of that in a way. And even though it's not totally true, but nonetheless, I think one of the board members earlier stated that growth goes in different areas at different times. And when like, for example, if Midway was a standalone, they may have lower rates today, but they're taking on a lot of risk because when that infrastructure needs to be replaced, right now, Heber City customers will fund that replacement. And if Midway was on its own, then what would happen is the rates would skyrocket upward because of the customers there having to fund the entire replacement of their infrastructure only. So there's a risk sharing by being part of a larger group like this. And like I said, I probably took the question out of context, but I just want you to understand that normally in a long-term perspective, from a ratepayer's perspective, short-term decisions do not result in what's good for the long term, because in the long term, having that larger base is going to stabilize the swings that customers would see in rates. So I just wanted to emphasize that. So, and I think everything I just said was actually said by a board member throughout the discussion, but I just wanted to emphasize it and summarize it.
Well, thank you, Mark. I feel like been very thorough. Really appreciate again all of your time to stay here with us and to dive in deep with us. Board, I'm going to turn it back to you now. Comments, questions, any ideas of whether to go forward or to pause and wait and think more? Your decision.
I've been on this board for 8 years. This is my 8th year. And when I come into this board, I come in knowing that I have wonderful citizens in Charleston. Love every one of them. They're good people. They deserve the best. But as you come into this position as a Heber Light and Power board member, you come in here and you look for not only, you look at the whole community. You don't look at just one portion. And you have to look out, you have to take them blinders off, and you have to scour this, and you have to say, what is the best for Heber Light and Power and their customers? Not my town, not my city, but the best for all our customers. And as I thought about this deeply, 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 I mean, people probably don't know how many nights sleep we have all lost over this. Because when it comes to raising a rate, you have to look, some people don't care. Some people say, you know what, it doesn't matter to me. I make $35 million a year. Why would that bother me, what I pay in power rates? Then you've got these poor little widows that, and poor people that are living on a fixed income, that every dollar means everything to them. And you're going, how do you put a ratio on there? Somebody said, well, we could break this down and we could have a pay raise, or we could do a raise in June and then we do one in October. But what difference would it make? That raise is going to be there before the end of the year, that 13%. I don't know about everybody else, but if we're going to raise it 13 point whatever percent, we need to do it all at once so people know, and not say, okay, let's do a 2% this month, a 3%, then a 5% to get up to that 13%. I feel like we have no choice, you guys. I would love to say, you know, I think we're wrong. I think we need to do something, but I don't think we have a choice. I've seen this through the years, go up and down, get behind and try to catch up, and we haven't been able to do that. And I think that now we're putting forth the effort that maybe in, who knows, maybe in 5 years from now, we'll only have to have a 1% raise, you know? Maybe that's what we'll have to do, is only have a 1% raise in our price of our power, but I don't know. I'm ready to make a decision.
Anyone else? Comments?
I'm really grateful for Mark. I'm really grateful for you and for UFS generally. I mean, you know, it's helpful to know where we're at. I was telling my wife about this decision, and Brenda, I think you're right. You know, I told her this morning, I said, there's going to be a lot of people upset later, probably, because the reality is, I know my boat is taking on water now. And yesterday I was sailing and it was smooth sailing, but now I know it's taking on water. And if I want to use my boat next year, I got to repair it. You know what I mean? Adam, thanks for helping understand the role. I read through for this decision, I read through more of the bylaws than I've ever read through before, which is saying something, and came to the same understanding you had largely, which is that we have to do what's right for the organization. And I'm glad to know where we're at. I think we have this is a public comment and a comment for me, I suppose. You know, I don't want to raise rates today, but I know where we're at now. And I think it is my duty to make sure Heber Light and Power remains strong, financially viable, and able to provide power to our customers. Otherwise, we will fail in our duty to them. And my duty is to make sure that we're able to do that. And I think I'm glad to know that this rate study doesn't immediately fix it. That I wish it did, but that'd be a bigger percent. But I'm glad to know that it does make a plan to getting our cash reserves back under control and to getting our debt coverage ratio back under control, because the debt coverage ratio in my business background is what enables us to be responsive if something changes in a big way in the future. If we have to bond to replace something, an emergency that we just didn't plan for, that's the bond ratio is, you know, that coverage ratio is what allows us to do that. And I can't in good conscience be sitting as a board member here and say, no, let's push the can down the road and hope it goes away. Now that I know we're taking on water, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm also ready to take action.
Anybody else? Kendall?
I just would say that, unless there's more comments, I would say that I agree with what's been said. And I would make the motion that we approve the rate 2025 through 27 rate plan has been presented tonight.
I'll second it. Well,
Okay.
Sid had it.
I'll go with Sid. He was just that half a second earlier. So Kendall, what you're proposing, first year 13.1%, as has been proposed. Second year 3.5%, and the third year another 3.5%.
Hopefully based on comments that maybe that'll go down, but the way it's presented right now.
Annually. Okay, so we've got the motion to approve it as presented with all those different rate classes, everyone, and adjustments.
Everything in there.
Go ahead, discussion.
Just a clarifying question.
Mhm.
And I know I made some comments on this. For year 2 and 3, the projected 3.5.
Yes.
You know, that's in the motion next
We'll
year.
revisit it.
Well, I commented if it can be adjusted because of.
Yeah, if we can lower it, that would be great,
So,
but who knows?
So are we actually approving, I guess what I'm getting, are we approving a 3.5 for year 2 and year 3?
Yes, we are.
Unless it's amended.
With continuous evaluation.
Change it, yes.
And it brings in the time of use. program.
for 2 and 3.
In years 2 and 3.
Do we need to change the motion to?
Yeah, go ahead.
all rate structures?
We need to know when you plan it.
Oh, thank you.
What was the date you were recommending, Bart?
Well, historically, we've done our rate increases in October.
That was for May
If it's
this
a shoulder
year.
month. Last year, we had to bump that one up. And we did that in.
Well, we bumped it up and added in that
Yeah.
piece that we took out.
So when you do this, we just need to know when you as the board want us to implement this. April is a shoulder month. If you want to do it immediately, April would be the best time. If you want to delay, go up over.
What was Mark's, like,
Do we need to do
Mark's
it now?
analysis was based on? when?
Mark, what was the implementation schedule for the rate structure?
April.
Jillian? April. So the April billing, first one?
Correct.
So I
Thank
would
you.
amend, I would amend the motion to add that it takes place beginning in the April billing.
I'll keep my second.
Did that answer your question, Kevin? Anything else?
I think.
That's what I said. Kevin, did that answer your question?
I believe so.
Okay. Anything else on the board discussion?
Do we, it's a separate question, but related based on what he said, do we already have in our, whether it's bylaws or in our rules of order or whatever, that we are committed to doing a rate study every year?
No, but we have done it.
We have done it the last 3.
Does it make?
What I would do.
I was just curious, because I
We
think.
got a motion and a second on the table, take a vote on this, and then do a follow-up motion to review this annually, to review this, so year 2 and 3 are reviewed prior to the increase going into it.
And then you can put that in the budget to do that.
Yeah.
That's a great call. That was what I was getting at, but I wasn't gonna make it change motion.
Did you want to add that, Kendall?
Well, he suggested a
Oh, follow-up motion.
separate
Yeah,
motion.
sorry, follow-up motion. Okay.
Can we do
Just
that
as-
even though it's not on the agenda, or is it a part of this?
Oh, I think it's part of it.
It's part of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the 25 to 27 rate plan.
Yeah.
So that's the way it's posted. Okay, any further discussion? All right, so we're going to start with a vote on this end, please. I put you on the hot seat first, I'm sorry. Yes, that was a yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll say yes.
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 Okay, that passes 6-0. Is there a follow-up?
I'd like to make
motion?
a follow-up motion that we commit to reviewing the rate study again annually in advance of the automatic 3.5 that was just approved, in case that 3.5 can change based on being too conservative or other changes that might come forward in a rate study.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
If I
Aaron.
could just clarify that, if I may,
Yes.
you don't really have to do a cost of service study each year, but each year in the interim, you should do a financial projection update only. I mean, believe me, I'd like to do the more work for you, but it's not really wouldn't be helpful.
Thank you for trying to save us money. Appreciate
So
that.
that's a financial projection update, Mark.
All right, I'm gonna change
Yeah,
my motion to
Component study.
move that we do a financial projection update so that we can be informed about rate changes in advance of that 3.5 automatically taking place.
I'll second.
Thank you, Brenda. Any further questions or discussion on this? All right, let's take a vote on this, Mr. Hot Seat.
Yes.
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 And Kevin, if you really want, I'll start with Sid next time, okay? All right, we have finished the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, Aaron. All in favor? Aye. Thank you again for coming. Thank you. This was a long night. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I want to thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it, everything, all the comments, all the effort everybody put in, not just you guys, but the customers in Heber City.
Little Mill.
No, I'm sorry, I say Heber City, Heber Light and Power customers, sorry. But to make the effort to come out, I think that was great.
Yes, yes, I totally agree. Thank you,
Appreciate
Jillian. Thank you, Mark, for your expert work. That your model was not the issue tonight at all. So thank you very, very much. Good job.
I've talked to my wife.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good day and a good trip.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.